The Kitmen have managed to create the world's first truly global empire, and it's basically a secret empire. We do it many ways, but principally, we identify a country that has resources our corporations covet, like oil, arrange a huge loan to that country from the World Bank or one of its sisters. The money never actually goes to the country. It goes to our own corporations to build big infrastructure projects in that country that help a few very wealthy people, but don't benefit the majority of the people who are too poor to buy electricity or have cars to drive on the highways, and yet they're left holding a huge debt that they can't repay. So we go back at some point and say, you know, you can't pay your debts. Give us a pound of flesh. Sell your oil real cheap to our oil companies. Vote with us on the next critical UN vote. Allow us to build a military base in your backyard. Something along these lines. And when we fail, the jackals go in and either overthrow or assassinate these leaders. And if the jackals fail, as they did in Iraq, then we send in the military. I don't think the failure is capitalism. I think it's a specific kind of capitalism that we've developed. We've created what I consider a mutant, viral form of capitalism. And this mutant form of capitalism, which I think is really a predatory form of capitalism, has created an extremely unstable, unsustainable, unjust, and very, very dangerous world. I've met a lot of terrorists. I've interviewed them for books. I've never met one who wanted to be a terrorist. They're desperate people. If we want to get rid of terrorism, we must get rid of the root causes, that cancer that is destroying our whole system. Because I think it's really important that we understand today we cannot have homeland security unless we understand that the whole planet is our homeland.
As vice president is a salute to the CIA and to the intelligence community and to the military-industrial complex. Their gravy train is going to continue.
Welcome to the Daily Wrap-Up, a concise show dedicated to bringing you the most relevant independent news as we see it from the last 24 hours. Wednesday, January 29th, 2025. Thank you for joining me today. I'm going to start today on a bit of a somber note. For those that have already heard, we had a death in the family. Now, this is something we've been expecting. It's been a long time coming. Unfortunately, we had an event that I was going to be speaking at in Mexico, and I made the very difficult decision to decide to stay and be here for my family. And it's very difficult because I'm definitely letting people down by not being, being where I said I would be. But ultimately, I think as we all, at least, it's something we talk about a lot in this show and the community and the kind of feeling that we put out that, family is a very core and very important part of our lives. And I think most people, agree with that. And so it was difficult for me to make that choice, but it was very important to me to be here for my family in this time. And my grandmother was a very central pillar of our family. She was the moral foundation for everything that we are. She was the background, the backbone for who I am and what I do on this show, for why my mother is the person she was, which is why we are the way we are in this family. And I think it's difficult to watch something like that, the bottom line is it's important to be here for something like this and to be present and to feel everything and experience everything and be here for my family. But overall, the bottom line is that I won't be there at the Mexico event, unfortunately, but I'm going to do my best to work as much as I can while I'm here. But I wanted to start with something that I thought was important, that cherishes her memory to start. And I know that's maybe not something that everybody watching cares about, but it's important to me. And I wanted to start with something that is emotional, but ultimately she wrote some things in a binder that we didn't find until after the fact. And it was pretty profound. A lot of different things that she wrote out about my mother, myself, and about what I do. And I thought it was important to share that with you because this is, again, somebody who is a foundational part of everything that I believe, like really the backbone of why I am the way I am today. And I think you'll see that in something that she wrote here. So, and you know, for those that the relationship in our family has always been very close, and ultimately she's somebody who was you know, the kind of family we talk about on the show in general, but helped raised both me and my brother, and you know, really instilled that kind of mindset in our family in general. But this is something she wrote about The Last American Vagabond that I thought you guys would appreciate. And says, lift your glasses. A toast is in order. To the last American vagabond, Ryan. He broadcasts the latest independent news to bring the latest truth out. He's trying. Ryan works extremely long hours researching the latest news. It adds up to most of the night and day. He wants to get the truth in the news out. It's more important to him than pay. He hears from people all over the world who listen to his every broadcast. They always enjoy the truth about the news, if not live, then maybe by podcast. Ryan always searches for the truth. He researches everything he reports on his show. He keeps up with the timely topics, the truth he wants people to know. He urges viewers to do their own research, not just take his word. If they take all the mainstream media's views, they will all be the same. It's absurd. Question everything is one of his favorite sayings. Don't take his word. He really means it. People need to think for themselves. They need to learn to do their own bit. Brian, you are a caring, decent man. To take your place, there could be no other. You have come a long way on your road to success. And I'm proud to be your grandmother. Now, she also had some other things that I wanted to share that I thought you guys would think were interesting. This was something that she wrote that it's funny that this is something that you'll get a very in-depth sense of who she was and how insightful she was and different things that she thought. And I bet you something says in here that somebody might even disagree with. And it says, where has our wonderful country gone? I hate to think of it that way. But when our freedom, liberty, and free speech aren't there, a far different country comes into mind, I'd say. Our founding fathers tried so hard to get all the rules just right, so the following generations of Americans would have freedom and liberty and not have to fight. When I grew up in the 40s and 50s, people had to work hard, but we were happier then. We were good neighbors and all helped each other. We did not wait for a check the government would send. We had good school teachers then and learned what was right and wrong. They taught us the basic subjects we needed to make a good American knowledgeable and strong. Today, the politicians are changing the rules. We no longer have the freedoms we had. Seems the government wants their new rules taught. Things are going from good to bad. Some people don't want to work anymore. They have become really dependent and lazy. They figure, why should I work when the government pays them not to? It's crazy. The teachers don't teach the basics anymore. They want to impose the government rules. Teaching CRT and telling the students they need to change. They really are not teachers. They're government fools. We need to get back to the old kind of world when life was good and people earned their own living. When people had respect for others and tried to help by giving. Our freedom fathers authored the Declaration of Independence. They had the right ideas for a democracy for all. If only we would get back to that original declaration, the country could refocus and stand tall. It's obviously, if you guys have heard me speak in the past, you know, she's somebody who is very, very, very much aware of the two-party illusion, as much as she definitely had her standing in different things, and we had good conversations about it. But it's amazing to think of that, to watch somebody who could see the change, the decline, right? The ebb and flow of the kind of political back and forth of all the nonsense, and she just has to sit there and watch it pass. Now, I'll leave. I won't go through this all. I will get into everything, but I think one thing I wanted to share was this. I think I've played this. I've showed this on the show before. This was something that she made for me. This was her version in her binder that I didn't know she had. And this is the picture of myself and my grandfather who passed a while ago, and her at my graduation. And it's the speech that I gave while speaking at graduation. And maybe I'll read this. Why not? Since I have it out. And then I had a bunch of other quotes that she had written out that I just thought were interesting, just to give you more insight of kind of the person she was. The kind of things that you might expect. Some of them you heard, like when the people fear the government, there's tyranny. When the government fears the people, there's liberty. Things like that. It's kind of the person she was. A government big enough to give you everything you want is strong enough to take everything you have. You wonder where I get the mindset that I do. Now this, I'll finish on this and then we can get into some of the important stuff today. And this is, again, this is the speech I gave graduating high school. And I've talked about briefly in the past as I went through my own trials in high school, almost dropping out entirely with my own issues with abuse and different things, and ultimately came back to graduate, giving the speech and, at closing graduation, and just very, very proud of that. And this is something that she was proud of me for accomplishing, and framed this and wanted me to be something that I remembered. And I wrote this 2001. I've had quite the experience here at CASA, learned many lessons, made mistakes. The funny thing is, the mistake I regret the most is not appreciating the time I had here until it was almost gone. And now I wish I had all that back. To just be new, little incoming freshman again, with all the dreams in the world, excited about all the adventures to come, with such hope in their eyes, with enthusiasm. I tell myself there are so many things I would do different if I just had the chance, but I don't, and I can't. What I can do is make sure not to make that mistake again. If I could pick one thought that would stick with all of you throughout the experiences to come, it would be to plain and simply live in the moment. Live each and every day as if it was your last. You see, because the moment you begin to take everything for granted is the moment when it will pass you by. You don't want your entire life to pass you by simply because you're always looking ahead for the next opportunity, missing the wonders and memories to be had right in front of you. Although we are all sad to be leaving our beloved high school memories in the past, this was merely a stepping stone in our lives, and whether we realize it or not, our lives begin today, not end. We have everything ahead of us. Everyone will be going their separate ways, beginning their separate goals. With every class that graduates from this school, people always ask themselves one question: how can I make a difference? I ask you now, go out and make a difference. Do something so that when people look back on this class, they say there's a class that truly changed the world. Obviously very, lofty and idealistic, naive even. But what's interesting about it is that it's something that I live with to this very day. Doesn't feel so naive when we're really making differences, when we're changing people's lives, when we're discussing things that I think truly have an impact. But it's funny how something like that can, even myself looking at it, some kid speaking in front of a bunch of high school kids about how we're going to go out there and change the world. I would call that naive. But at what point does it suddenly no longer become naive? At what point, if you just keep doing that and keep trying and keep instilling these things in other people and guiding that, the kind of, what's the pay it forward kind of mindset, and then things start to happen and people do start changing and things are having a positive effect. Well, at one point, maybe it never was, is a way to think about it. But anyway, let's get started with some important stuff today, guys. Thank you for bearing with me. I think I wanted to do that for myself more than anybody. I hope somebody got something out of that. And I think it's important to realize who we are really comes from. And it's not just your family, but it's everybody around you, everybody that influences you, including all of you here. But I want to talk about one thing, basically one general thing today that I think is important that goes through a lot. And I'll tell you, I've been, as you guys know, even before a lot of this, there's a lot pulling my attention away. And over the last so many days, I'm sure there's plenty of things right now that I'm probably even missing. But I even then still pulled off a lot of stuff that I want to get to, and I'm going to do my best. I can't promise when the next, I'm do my best to get a show out tomorrow. I just don't know exactly what's going to happen day to day. My point, though, is a lot of the stuff tomorrow, like the foreign policy stuff around the ceasefire, for example, I had to pull a lot of that off today just because I think it's important to get focused on, something that really stood out to me. But on the last show I did, 5 hours of it, in fact, there's a lot of important things in that really still hold true to this very moment on what are going on there. Sadly, a lot of the things that we could go over, just to reiterate from the last show, the lies around the ceasefire, the Bibas family, all these things are very still much, very in the focal point of the illusion of it all. And we'll go through more of that. But today, ultimately, this kind of overarching point of how these things kind of, both the foreign policy aspect, the technocracy aspect of it, the smaller points within it, the DARPA financial aspect, the Visa partnering with Twitter, all these different things are continuing to build into something much more alarming that, already is alarming, but it is becoming more and more transparent the more these things develop. Overlapping that, with the Stargate program, the mRNA dynamic. I mean, all these things are exactly what we've been warning about. I mean, it's, I hate to say, and I told you so kind of thing, but that's exactly what we're getting at, guys. This is the concern we've always been laying out. You now bring that together with this anti-Semitism executive order that hasn't officially happened. But I think it's obvious. It's already been floated. It's been discussed. It's being covered by everybody. It's being funded very clearly by the people that we've been telling you where the funds are coming from. This is an obvious objective Trump's been pushing this since his last administration. So we want to go over where this is going to go and what this means and how these things kind of come together. How exactly do you think they're going to be finding out who exactly is? I mean, it's the same conversation as the immigration border conversation with digital technology. That's how this is going to work. And so this very clearly is a means to an end, to rationalize, to justify where this is going, but using something that they know you'll care about. And in many cases, we should care about. But it's very dystopian. And I think it's very obvious how this is building together. Now, there's a few other points that if we have time, we'll get to. I mean, just to quickly, stuff we can get to tomorrow or the next day, but just blatant lies, blatant misrepresentation. Like, for example, this absurd condom Gaza story, which is just flatly false. I mean, it's incredible the kind of misinformation that's not just getting pushed through their own White House spokesperson, but the fact, and Doge being allegedly responsible, but the idea being that it's being parroted through all the new media, who right now with another story is going to be allegedly the ones that are ending up in the White House press briefings. Which, interesting way is something that we would like to see other than corporate media. But if it's just the new fake independent media, that's the new corporate media, then it's just another illusion. And that's what a lot of this stuff is. But we'll have to wait and see how it plays out, right? If somebody, all of a sudden, we get a very multifaceted, all over the, non-partisan grouping of people, then we would say something might be changing in a positive direction. But when they just say podcasts and so on, and we get the sense it's going to be the people that are parroting exactly what they're told to say, which is what we're all seeing, then it's going to be the same difference with a little bit different flavor. Yeah, I'm pessimistic when it comes to how these things work, but we have a right to be. The precedents are there, but I hold out hope for the positive change. But the problem here is that we can see that, or for example, the was the other one? There's a whole bunch of things I have at the end that are all just like blatant, or like I think I might have this in the beginning part. Well, like Elon Musk and the $1 million giveaway point. I think that would become either today, one of these next shows. I moved a lot around today, where it turns out that he lied about that and is now he's getting in legal trouble for it. Remember when they said we're going to give away $1 million to people if you come, basically bribing people to come vote, which is what we told you they were after they just got done accusing the other side of doing. It turns out it wasn't so random, even though he literally said randomly chosen in the tweets he shared. Now they're telling a court of law that it wasn't random and it wasn't actually a giveaway. We chose them to represent our PAC, but that's not what everybody was told who thought they were entering into a random raffle. So we're being lied to everywhere. And it seems that most honest people are beginning to have the courage to call that out. But there's a lot more dishonest people than we realize that are immersed in all of this, who are benefiting wildly from this fake dynamic that Twitter seems to be this general engine of it all. It's pretty interesting. But we'll get to it today, and if not at the end of the day, tomorrow, but today mainly over this main point from how this works with the social engineering dynamic, how they're using the immigration overlap, the anti-Semitism bill, and then how that is overlapping already with what I see coming. And the latter part will be my opinion for whether it happens coming in the future or not, but not whether or not it has happened, which is ADL and other groups specifically faking extremist marches, faking extremist events, faking anti-Semitism events in order to rationalize exactly what we're seeing and how that then all comes together. And I'm going to paint a very clear picture, I think, today of how these things have been used in the past, from the ADL to your government to the base to the Odd Waffen division to the Azov movement. These are fake entities that are being used. Patriot Front. Guys, we're being played in a very, very clear way. Or Terrorgram. Maybe you didn't hear about that one. It's a cutoff of the same entities, and this all ties back to Israel, U.S., CIA funding. It's not hard to see. And then what did we just recently talk about? The CIA telling you, oh no, Al-Qaeda is pumping into the country, possibly biological. They're starting the fires in LA. And who's fanning that? No pun intended. Donald Trump saying we need the CIA. Suddenly the CIA is telling you the biolab attack, and they're giving interviews, and apparently we're going to be saved by the CIA. I mean, how is anybody falling for this? Especially Republicans. It's flabbergasting. It really is. I just don't get it. But let's start off with just highlighting this show. because I really want you guys to look into this more, because I'm telling you guys, and I've been calling this for a year, they're going to use this family, and it's going to make me sick, and I'm going to have to, just like with the rape conversation, one of the few who has the courage to stand there and call it out while it's happening. And there's a lot. I only say a few because there's obviously been a majority of people that were terrified to talk about it, not lying about it, but there was a huge portion of people that were honest enough to call that out, and it was hard, guys. What a terrible thing to have to talk about, to tell you that you're lying to us about women being raped. And they were, guys. They were lying. And we know they're lying. And they're lying to this very day. And this, they're talking about the Bibas family and how these children are, they're basically, the father claimed rather, to be as accurate as possible on a video that they were killed by the IDF. And every single other video like this we've gotten from hostages have continued to back up what they said while they were there. That point is, that means you wouldn't argue that by default that they must be being forced to say it, if every other one of them has come back and still said the same thing. And they have. So the reality would be the evidence leans in the direction of this is clearly what happened. On top of the fact that we have other hostages who have already said this is what happened, other news reports who have had to cover this is what happened. And it turns out that the IDF is even aware that this has happened, and they've already been trying to hide it. Now, this is all developed recently, right? There's a lot of this. Or, for example, the woman that was supposedly the central pillar of the rape story with her gray pants with the blood. As we've been telling you, they were lying about that. But it turns out they had the video that could prove they knew she wasn't raped from the very beginning. Now, it's hard to say whether the family was aware of that lie or they just went along with it when Israel pushed it, but they knew, guys. They knew that she cut her ankle and her wrist, and she was sitting in the truck, and it made her pants bloody. She's now one of the people that got released. So she's out. She was not raped, guys, and we've been lied to from day one. And all of this continues to build, and nobody still stops it. Now, that story I just can't not get frustrated about, but we'll get more into it's important though to understand this, because the Israel part of this is a central reality of what's happening in our country right now. I still frankly think that most everybody knows that right now, which is crazy to me. I've never really been in a position where we're already, we're on the side of it in my mind where everybody already sees it. But it's just nothing's changing. And so we're all confused. It's like, all it really shows you is that we don't live in the world we think we do. When it really comes down to it, they don't care at all what we think. And now if they're recognizing no one's doing anything, they're just going to keep going because they know we see it. They know we see them. They know we see what they really are, but we're not stopping them. And we don't have a power to make them remove. So they just keep going. Now, I'm not calling for violence, guys, but the reality is that we need to think about another way to change this. If we can see that so clearly, if we can watch the Millers and the Patels and the Kirbys knowingly continue to ignore Rejab and all the rest of the evidence they know they're hiding from, the starvation tactics, the bombings, everything, and then go on to allow Israel to influence and infiltrate and populate all sorts of manipulations in this country, all of them, left and right. That's the reality of where we're at right now, and it's a terrifying thing, but we cannot just keep letting this drift forward. Now, the ceasefire part of it was a huge part, right? We know that they've been violating this from the very moment it started, just like with Lebanon, and the same thing, and they just don't care. Every day, they keep killing children. They keep bombing, starvation, Lebanon, same thing, and they haven't even pulled out of Lebanon. That was supposed to happen. Nobody says a word. Where are all the supposed rules-based order? Because it doesn't exist right now. That's kind of terrifying, isn't it? But the Stargate operation is just Warp Speed 2.0. So for those still trying to pretend that Donald Trump is somehow, it's not you're being lied to. It's rolling out in front of you. It's time to be an adult about this and start acknowledging what's happening in front of us. And so watch this 5-hour show if you want to get through all the information within it. I think it's all very important. It's not some 5-hour long conversation about one point. It's a 5-hour conversation with about 5 days worth of content in it. So check it out. I really hope you'll get something out of it. But so on, but here's the clip I shared to start. The reason I wanted to play that, it's just the classic, confessions of an economic hitman. Guys, this is the reality that goes well before the technocratic age. Simply pointing out that this is how they've abused these situations. And I played that clip before of the, it's basically about the U.S. government maintaining its preeminence at all costs over everybody, including you. Your interest, it's about their success over the circumstance. You don't matter. They don't. Nothing matters other than that control. We've seen this roundly proven over the years, and we still debate whether this is what they are or not. So in this case, we have people who have admitted this to us. And we go back to people like Smedley Butler, for crying out loud, who tell us it's a racket, guys. We're being played. War is a Racket is a famous book written by Smedley Butler from the U.S. military. It goes back to the 40s. How many times can we be told? In this case, it's about them abusing the situation to the point that where it's very predatory capitalism. Now we're seeing that basically become fascistic technocracy. It's all blending together. But it's a good thing to understand. And then I also played the clip from Decentered News, just kind of flashing back to RFK Jr. openly telling you that J.D. Vance, is basically the CIA, that this is going to be a boon for the CIA. But, well, I guess in case somebody just happened to tune in, I'll play it real. It's only 40 seconds.
Pick as vice president is a salute to the CIA and to the intelligence community and to the military industrial complex. Their gravy train is going to continue.
Well, yeah. And now what they're all telling you the CIA needs to be pulled in. Like, imagine that. Imagine starting an mRNA platform program and then leaning in with the OpenAI, Sam Altman AI, and saying he's the leading guy in AI while Elon Musk is somewhere over in the corner. How's that make sense? Or this, and literally rolling into, or RFK for that matter, with an mRNA platform and RFK Jr. in the corner. Right? Or this guy telling you the CIA killed my father, and then Trump comes out and goes, we need to work with the CIA, and he's the CIA's guy. And none of it lines up, guys. So if you somehow want to pretend like you have the secret QAnon inside word when it's just a bunch of guesses, you don't know any more than anybody else what's actually going on around these people unless you're in that inner circle. All you do know is that nothing makes any sense, and that should make you pretty damn uncomfortable. Max Blumenthal. Now, one opening point I want to make sure you saw was that Ali Abunimah from Electronic Intifada has been released. Now, Max put this out on the 28th, it was yesterday. It seems Israeli assets in Switzerland not only coopted the security minister who ordered Abunimah's arrest, they convinced him to jail him, Ali, on the basis of his factual reporting exposing Israel's crimes on October 7th. So the same thing. This is the level of infiltration of the Zionist extremist government. Not only Jews or only Israelis, but the Zionist Israeli government who has co-opted both Judaism in regard to Israel as well as the Israeli state, but also Christianity and also the U.S. government and, a lot of other things. So you could pretend it's about one thing if you want, but that'd be your willful ignorance, if you will. The point, though, is that this is the kind of infiltration the extremist Zionist government is carrying out all around the world. And now you have somebody like Ali who's been covering this provably, factually for a very long time, getting arrested simply because he's exposing their crimes. But now he's released. And here's what he said. On Monday evening, he was brought to Zurich airport in handcuffs in a small metal cage inside a windowless prison van and led all the way to the plane by police. This is after 3 days and 2 nights in a Swiss prison, cut off from communication with the outside world. With no charge, apparently, in a cell 24 hours a day with one cellmate, not even permitted to contact my family. How exactly is that legal? I mean, what think about how wild this is. This was meant to be a threat, if you want my honest opinion, which you always do, which I always give. I mean, what was the charge? Nothing. Okay. Why wouldn't he be allowed to call somebody? I mean, there are rights that exist. Whether you're, wherever you are, guys. I'm pretty sure I can't speak to my immediate knowledge of what the dynamics are of like your phone call in Switzerland, but pretty sure there is some level of process, not 3 days in the cell with no contact. That's what happens when the Zionist government asks. This is on Saturday in a police interview in the presence of my lawyer. They accused him of offending against Swiss law without ever telling him what crime he committed or listing any charges. As far as he knows, he's not been charged with any crime whatsoever. He was held in administrative detention. You know what other place does that? Israel, with children in Gaza. On Sunday morning, they took me from my cell and for questioning by Swiss defense minister intelligence agents without the presence of his lawyer. That seems to be a crime. And they again refused to allow him to contact him or his family. He refused to talk to them without his lawyer and told them to take him back to his cell. During his imprisonment, he said, I refused every meal and every cup of tea they offered me except the last meal. After I knew I would be going home, I accepted only water, which is the right of every human being. All of this was after I was abducted off the street around 1:30 on Saturday while on my way to Palestine teach-in by undercover agents. Handcuffed, forced into an unmarked car and sped straight to the prison. His crime? Being a journalist who speaks up for Palestine and against Israel's genocide and settler colonial savagery, and those who aided and abetted it. Came to Switzerland with the invitation of the Swiss citizens to talk about justice for Palestine, to talk about accountability for a genocide in which Switzerland too is complicit. This is why they're playing the game. But while he was hauled into prison like a dangerous criminal before he even had a chance to say a word, Israeli President Isaac Herzog, who declared at the start of the genocide that there are no civilians in Gaza, no innocents, received a red carpet welcome in Davos. You know, the same Davos that Trump spoke at, the same Davos that Milei spoke at, the same Davos that Elon Musk has been trying desperately to be a part of for years, rolled out the red carpet. By the way, Trump's also meeting with Netanyahu, the first person he's going to meet with, or the first person Rubio calls, Netanyahu. Totally just a coincidence, though, right? Doesn't give you exactly the indication that anybody with a brain would be picking up on by now. Totally not. Says, and on this very day, Netanyahu freely travels to Poland to make a mockery of the Auschwitz commemoration, despite an outstanding ICC warrant. I mean, the bottom line is, guys, this is exactly what we experience as you know, humanity, guys. If you're dealing with something that has the kind of, like, what we're talking about is a Zionist entity that is without question influencing, exerting its very devious, sinister control over powerful people that are compromised. Like, I don't really understand how we could make sense of this as just people that want to go along with this. Everything they do undermines their own interests. The only way you make sense of that is somebody's being challenged. They're being compromised, threatened, blackmailed, whatever. Same thing I say about the U.S. government. There's no logical reason you could give me that would make sense of why Biden would destroy literally everything he pretended. Like, I don't believe they cared about any of the stuff they're putting forward. But at the very least, they wanted you to think they did. And what he did was destroy all of that. Even Trump. Trump right now is throwing away a huge amount of support from his own base because he's supporting a genocide that half of them recognize. You mean you don't think they could do it a little bit more tactfully, a little bit more sneaky and underhanded? No, they're coming out right over the top and slapping you in the face with it. Why would they do that? Because somebody's making that happen. Seems to me a desperate Zionist entity that is drowning in its own crimes and is trying to throw everything at the end of the kitchen sink at you right now. But I'm glad he's free. He deserves to be free because he's doing amazing work and he's being charged for being a journalist, which your government seems to be completely okay with, pretty much wherever you are, maybe except for Yemen. In this case, I want to start with this clip I thought was interesting, and this makes a broader point about the two-party illusion, and also a general point that I keep making about what I think they're doing to you right now. Now, it's important to think about how, in any case, like, let's just say this was all that what you're going to see is a half measure that I think exposes the two-party illusion, but also is but when I say it's a half measure, it's because he's basically not giving you the answer by trying to make you think he would, but can't because he's bound by something. And so that to me is a half step. It's an illusion. But that's why people want to go, oh, he's telling us the truth. They knew it. But is he, though? Is he actually telling you anything other than going wink, wink, you know what I'm about to say, and then letting you fill in the blank? And in a sense, protecting Joe Biden by doing so. Whatever you think his logic is. This is a way to manipulate you. I feel quite certain about that.
Blew up the Nord Stream pipeline.
I don't want to get our country in trouble, so I won't answer it. But I can tell you who it wasn't, was Russia. Yeah. How about when they blamed Russia? You know, they said Russia blew up their own pipeline. It wasn't Russia. So I won't answer the question only because I don't want to get our country any deeper than they already are. But very dangerous to do it. But I think most people know who did it.
What? See, that's a classic BS Trump answer. Do you know who knows that it wasn't Russia? Literally everybody on the planet. Just like everybody knows. Like, this is the kind of thing we keep talking about. They're giving you the things that nobody's confused about. Is anybody confused about JFK, MLK? Everybody knows these things. Now, I don't mean literally everybody, but I mean a vast majority of the world is already very much aware that the U.S. government's involved with Martin Luther King Jr.'s death because they found that in a civil suit in the court of law, and it was publicly reported. But yes, but we don't teach it, and we water it down. The government lies about it. But my point is, most people kind of generally know these things already. In this case, is anybody stupid enough to still actually believe that other than people that blindly watch only corporate media, which I don't think is a majority? Everyone knows this. So by doing this, it's an easy fake win. But he didn't even win. He didn't tell you anything. So what he effectively does is defend Joe Biden, right? So we know the U.S. government did this. I think that's objectively clear. But you know, When he sits there and doesn't tell you that, but says, I think we actually know, that gives all of them to go, oh, he knew it. He's telling you it's by, but you don't know what he's thinking. Maybe he's thinking something different than you are. Maybe the bottom line is if you're going to believe that he is going after, like we're told he's going to arrest Hillary Clinton, right? He's going to lock up Joe Biden, right? Isn't that the plan? Except then he works with him, makes deals with the Ukraine and drives along with him, sits at company with him at different events. But it's all a secret. He's doing this to lull him into, whatever the Q narrative is. My point is, if you can't recognize that him not doing this, like if this was a crime, which it was, and Joe Biden's responsible, why would that be a hurt? This would be what an honest person would do. That was Joe Biden. We can prove it, put him in jail. But he doesn't because he's on the same side, because they knows what will happen. They're both on the same game here. Even if you don't think they're on the same side, Donald Trump would then feel that he would be potentially at risk because of that. Maybe you care more about I care about the truth. You cannot pretend like he's fighting these guys if he constantly pulls punches that avoids putting them in jail, whether Clinton or Biden or Hunter or anybody. I just find it to be crazy. And I can't say that's not somebody who's fighting the deep state. That's somebody protecting the deep state. How do you not see that? So that point for me, I think is important, because I think the obvious reality is that they're working from the same side of this. And whether it's Clinton or anything about on Epstein or whatever this stuff is, I hope, like all the rest of these narratives, the list will come out and they'll get rid of the FBI and all these things they're saying. I sure as hell hope that's the case. Why wouldn't I? But when they inevitably do not happen, I don't want to have to constantly make the game is we always come back around, see, it's what we're saying, and no, that's not what actually happened. He changed his mind, or they turned out it was this, or Democrats wouldn't let him. Did I ever tell you what I thought that simply thought it wasn't going to come to pass? And how many times can that keep happening with so many different narratives until we just stand back and go, well, guess what? It kind of never does. They just like to feed you BS and keep you in the dark. In the context of how this works, well, here's another example of another fake, what would you call it? An illusion, but a fake hero. In this case, we're talking about Twitter. But this is what I think is really important, is that right now, with everything we're dealing with, it's like the fake Nord Stream comment. In this case, the Twitter's saving free speech, or the Twitter's fighting for this and that. Okay. Meanwhile, they're literally working with Israel. Okay. Literally working with Authentics to take your biometric data. Okay. That doesn't really line up. Well, actually working with the ADL to make sure you're still being censored for Israel. Okay. These things aren't sounding so good so far. On top of that, I keep seeing this, by the way, and I don't know anybody else who could. Let me know if you've seen this ever on Twitter. I'm starting to wonder if these things are specific to certain people, but I get this constantly. Some privacy related extensions may cause issues. Okay. Well, that's their prerogative as a platform, right? But don't profess to be some privacy forward free speech platform if you're stopping people from using VPNs and other ways that would affect your platform. But I constantly get this. My point then is that is an indication, which I already know, I think anybody with a brain can see coming forward. They are not going in the direction of privacy. They're going in the direction of whatever they're told to do for the ADL discussion. And that's about censorship. That's about exposing anonymity. How many times have they both already told you this, Yaccarino and Musk? They don't, anonymity is the enemy. They keep telling you that. Well, then we act like it's some 4D chess move and he's making something up. He told you what he's going to do. Like with WeChat, like with X everything app, it's all what he already told you, but we make up a fun narrative about how he meant something else. In this case, this guy, he loves to share this rabbit hole's tweets, even though he's literally, I don't know whether, I think rabbit hole is saying things that, I don't know. I haven't looked at the account in a while. Anyway, the point is, whether rabbit hole is making these statements about Elon Musk or just about other people, Elon loves to go, exactly, the thing he said that I'm not is all, even though every time he seems to share this guy's content, it's exactly what he's doing. Like the guys censoring free speech are the ones that are the enemy. And he's like, yeah, I'm like, well, yeah, that's you, man. That's what you're doing. In this case, it says, oh, you're posting at an alt, like on an alt account. Why don't you use your real photo and name so I can call your employer and get you fired for disagreeing with my stupid worldviews? And he goes, anonymity lets more people have a voice. He goes, exactly. I mean, what an absolute clown. You're literally trying to stop anonymity. You've been public about that. But exactly the thing you like to say, and I'll pretend I'm on your side because people will blindly follow me if I say exactly. It's embarrassing. And here is an example of one of many we've talked about in the past of what libs of TikTok getting this person fired from Home Depot because they made a tasteless joke about Donald Trump's assassination. And that was over the top, right? So the worst kind of hypocrite, right? The one that was just righteous indignation about all the mean lefties and bad woke snowflakes. And then in comes the broflakes, right? In comes the woke right to do the exact same thing that they just did, but it's okay because it's our thing. And you're not allowed to make Trump look bad because, you're a complete clown hypocrite. You're doing exactly the same thing that they do. And we all see it. The woke right is no longer hidden. Here's what Pauly said about that. A group of accounts forcibly removed her family's anonymity on this platform. They're still on Twitter. Nick Fuentes was doxxed on Twitter, refused to remove the post, and a killer showed up at his home. Elon is a tyrant who does selective enforcement of the rules. He's also a hypocrite. Completely agree with that. I mean, the post alone is ridiculous because he's actively not doing what he says he's doing. How about Laura Loomer, for example? Didn't they boot her off because she was doxing the guy and made the racist jokes? But she was given a chance to come back on. How come the other people weren't? Because it's selective. It's selective, and it's about what will interest your, she's as disgustingly racist as a lot of things you're pretending to put forward. So I guess it works for you. But it's gross, guys. It's on the face dishonest. But in case you forgot, I just did this today again. Here's X, Twitter, background, authenticity. So basically the way I go through this to find out if it's still there is you go through and report something. Some of them, report spam. It just goes, thanks for reporting. But if you go through to report somebody impersonating, it takes you through this process, which I'll never click the next button on. Oh my God, it keeps checking that automatically for me. I don't want to accidentally bump it. But so you go through the process and it says, okay, well, we need to find out who you are to be able to verify that somebody's impersonating you, right? And look what it says. I consent to Twitter and Authentics still to this very day. That I don't know why these points are so small. Or rather, because we're being suppressed in the content. I'm sure if Tucker Carlson made this point, it will be the biggest bombshell of the day. Realize that this is an Israeli intelligence-connected company that is literally taking your biometrics right there, even though Twitter doesn't need those right now. Yep. And that's an Israeli intelligence entity, Unit 8200 Connected, which deals with a huge portion of Israeli intelligence on their end of things. Why would Israel be doing this for Twitter? Oh, probably because they have an interest in gathering your biometrics. Or as Censored Man points out, not just Authentics, but CHEQ, which is another Israeli intelligence-connected startup that's supposed to be fighting the bots. Well, how's that working out? Now that we're overwhelmed with Israeli bots and they control the conversation, that's how this works. We're being played. It's very simple. Just want to make sure we point that out because don't forget, he still pretends that Authentics has stopped. They no longer use it. Some people still get shown Stripe when they do this. That in and of itself should be alarming to us, guys. Too many people are pretending they've won already. We're winning. And so they just pretend it's not happening in front of them. Those people are the most, the problem with that is that they represent the largest problem in this conversation. People that are too caught up in their own illusion to even acknowledge what's happening in front of them while acting like you're somehow fighting the plan. On another note, as Just the Thought points out, this is rampant. She says, a genuine thank you to anyone who reported this tweet or who commented about this account. This one's Illuminati bot who continuously is stealing other people's words. And I mean, literally, this is not just an idea, or this is people that are seeing a post and then just literally copying and share it. Well, by the way, that's, I mean, I don't know if that's a violation of their terms of service or not. It's pretty disgusting. It's shady and you should be called out for it. But it's digital content theft, I guess, and I'm sure they don't care about that. My point is, I just don't think it technically violates any law, but the point is it's being, not just that they're doing it, but that they do it, and then very select accounts who grab up all the other things get propped up by the Elon circle and the rest of it. It's very disingenuous. And this one, as you can see, it's saying, I've seen this community note reaffirm this before. These accounts are monetized. Right? This one has 2 million followers and are making money off smaller accounts. We should unfollow and report these as often as possible because even though the account is named bot, someone somewhere is profiting from it. It says to RIP Twitter when we were here to share ideas and stories and not make money off each other. The point here is this, and this person said it did to her, this person a while back. It says, this is the case with nearly every post from that account and other associated accounts. They posted the post many times. And look, you can see it. Identical. And you can look in the time frame, you can see it's earlier. So that may not matter to you, right? But I think what's important is there's only select versions of these accounts that share and then maybe half the time omit certain partisan elements or add things that they get propped up by the Elon inner circle. That I think is very, very telling for where we go right now. And then you overlap that with the financial aspect. So what I'm going to get to in a second, guys, is the very concerning element of all this. That is, make sure I didn't move that. Oh, maybe I did. Hold on one second. If I did, I feel like I want to add that back real quick. Basically, there's an additional part that I want to get into about the ethics part of it because it becomes suddenly very relevant. Oh, yeah, I think I added it. Shoot. We'll see. We'll just go through it naturally and see if I'm already jumping ahead of myself maybe and did it a second ago. But so the bottom line is that there's a part, if I don't get to today, about the ethics pledges, which are still very relevant. I mean, I've been telling you that's going to become a relevant story because no one seems to care about it. But yeah, let's leave it there for now. The point was ultimately that in this context, there's an overlap with the crypto side of this, as well as a lot of other points. I'm starting to see a picture develop where I believe that we're seeing a lot of financial crimes happening here. But let's be clear about this. I think every one of them do this, from Nancy Pelosi's stock manipulation to just about everybody in this position trying to profiteer as best they can because they know that's what everyone else is doing. And in fact, I look at this like some kind of a dirty cop dynamic. You know, the old classic idea that cops kill cops they don't trust, like from every old movie we've seen, right? I think that's how this operates. I think that if you do not take manipulations, money, and bribery in politicians, like they get rid of you. Maybe legitimately, or maybe just box you out of the whole situation. Because I think if they're all criminal, they don't want someone who doesn't want to. I think that's what we're dealing with. Either way, my point is that whether it's Twitter and Visa overlapping or the crypto dynamic, would it allow basically money to funnel into Donald Trump's crypto or Melania's crypto without any real transparency, and they didn't sign ethics pledges, so we don't even know what these connect to? I think we're watching some. Honestly, I think you recognize. I think Israel's a playing part of that, like directly funneling cash right through this administration for a lot of things. But it could be any number of other things. So I want you thinking about this ethics overlap or this way that we see money flying around that's done in ways in a technological point that we didn't usually see in the last so many administrations. But this is from ABC. Elon Musk's Twitter partners with Visa, which in and of itself should be a large point. All these people, we're fighting the deep state, we're the rebels, and we're working with every single large mainstream thing that exists. Because that all lines up, right? We're working with all the billionaires, we're working with the government, we're working with the military, we're working with the CIA, we're working with the high-level transactions, we're working with crypto, but we're all rebels fighting the deep state. You literally just described the deep state. I mean, I'm more baffled now about why anybody still pretends this isn't the most transparent thing in the history of politics. Maybe they do. Maybe we're in such a controlled dynamic because of where this goes that maybe we all see it. Maybe it's like COVID. Maybe literally everybody sees this right now, except for moron screaming Republican types, right? The Joneses, Nick Sorters of the world, that they're yelling for everything's great and Twitter saving the world and Republicans are winning. Or maybe I'm wrong and I'm the only one. I don't know. To me, it seems like a cartoon right now. But partners with Visa on payment service in an effort to become an everything app. That's a quote. It's exactly, didn't they used to pretend we were crazy for even saying that because it was uncomfortable at the beginning point because it felt too much like China and close to technocracy and COVID and, digital ID. Oh, that's not true. He's not going to do that. And then step by step, it became the logic for why we need it because we're fighting immigration and, whatever it is. It's crazy, guys. This is everything we were all worried about when it was something other than Elon Musk. We're being funneled into a very clear control structure. And Visa does not represent anything other than corporate mainstream internal. Visa is tagged to everything, guys. The intelligence entity, the military, foreign dynamics. Visa is not on the side of anything other than the deep state establishment. Or let's remove the deep state, the establishment. It's such a broad, muddied term today. Whatever you think that means, and everyone's got a different picture. I just simply mean the unelected power structure. I think that's what it really means. It says Twitter's teaming up with Visa to offer systems for real-time payments on the app. Weird. Like we all told you. How do you think that's going to work? How exactly do you think that's going to function? You're going to need a digital ID. There's no way around it. You're going to probably end up getting forced into some kind of crypto digital dynamic on the currency side of it all. which will probably be some kind of, as we've talked about, some kind of stable coin, privatized aspect of it, Twitter coin or whatever else, or maybe they'll use one of their meme coin. Who knows? It's not, it is what you'd push back on if it was anybody other than this and doing it in this moment. Visa is the first partner for the platform X Money account, see, which is set to launch this year. Linda Yaccarino from the World Economic Forum, because you can trust her, right, said in a post, the offering will support an in-platform digital wallet and peer-to-peer payments connected to users' debit cards with an option to transfer funds to a bank account. You know who else was involved with the social credit dynamic in COVID? MasterCard. All right. These are interconnected. You're literally being told you're going to have a digital wallet and a peer-to-peer exchange on their app, not some peer-to-peer crypto dynamic that doesn't require a middleman. No. They're the middleman, right? My point is not like crypto's supposed to be, but how they want you to think it is. Right? Isn't crypto supposed to bolster the state? Isn't that how it works these days? Apparently freedom, libertarian stuff. It's all about building the state up, right? Wild. It's exactly what we warned about. Now, Dominic says, X partners with Visa to launch X Money. If they can take away your check mark and suspend your account, they can take away your money. How is this not obvious? Now, I wouldn't even call it a precursor to social credit. This is social credit, guys. You're being walked in, you're being Pied Pipered by the Pied Piper of technocracy right into the structure you thought you just got done fighting. Right in front of you. Whitney points out the part of the government, well, first, the Rage shares this, DARPA to launch pre-crime AML program. You'd think maybe they'd give it like a moment in between, right? No, just one after another, right? So you've got DARPA's XAI Twitter program that they're literally working on, but you're not supposed to know that. Right? And then DARPA rolls out its financial pre-crime dynamic, totally not connected, even though they're running both programs. How do you not see this? The Department of Defense is planning to launch a new anti-money laundering program aiming at stopping money laundering before it happens. Totally. But not when they do it, though, right? Because they launder money as a matter of policy, but that's the good guy stuff. We'll only go after the bad guy stuff. You know, maybe if you're you're an American living overseas, and we'll use our external tax service to make sure we scoop up what you have, make sure you're not laundering money somewhere else, go after Iran and all the ones we don't like. And then as we literally launder money with the CIA, because they're going to be helping, Trump just told you, that's what they do. This will not be aimed at anything other than people they want to suppress, people they want to sideline. It's pre-crime on top of all of it, guys. That's what they're literally telling you. Before it happens, how do you think that makes sense? How do you want to line that up with the Constitution? Oh, we already moving past that? That's what they want. That's what they keep telling you. Burn the flag, go to jail. Who cares about the Constitution? Yeah, screw those Muslims. Guys, you're being played in such a spectacularly obvious way. This will be used to suppress you. How do you think they're going to be able to? If it hasn't happened yet, then this is a violation of your rights. But every which way, they're kind of wiggling their way in to get you to undermine your own rights. Whitney says, the part of the government that's never passed an audit and is part of the massive black budget blob is launching a program to stop money laundering before it happens. Think about that. Think about how comically stupid that is if it wasn't so terrifying. They're the one, trillions and trillions in debt that they just keep pushing up, but they're going to make sure. If history is an indication, this will be just another cool tool to clamp down on the informal economy and surveil the public, while enabling business as usual at the national security agencies that commit this crime at a scale that would boggle the minds of most. And then Catherine Austin Fitz just says, you got that right. That is pretty crazy. The timing of all of this. Matt Kim made a little quick video on this about DARPA and pre-crime. Here's what he had to say.
Ready for pre-crime? The Department of Defense just announced their new DARPA program, the Anticipatory and Adaptive Anti-Money Laundering Initiative, A3ML. This program claims it will revolutionize how we detect and prevent money laundering using cutting-edge technologies. So what does it actually mean? A3ML aims to identify suspicious financial activity before it becomes harmful. It will use predictive analytics, real-time monitoring, advanced machine learning, and AI systems to achieve this. DARPA plans to collaborate with government agencies, financial institutions, and technology companies to gather data and information. If you're thinking, but I don't commit financial crimes, think again. This isn't just about criminals. This is a government surveillance program that will comb through all financial transactions, targeting individuals before a crime is even committed. Sound familiar? This is literally the beginning of a Minority Report style pre-crime system. There are huge concerns here. One, ethical concerns. How do you prevent false positives? Imagine being flagged for a crime that hasn't happened. Or two, surveillance issues. This is a direct infringement on your right to financial privacy. Three, reliance on AI. What data is being used to train these systems? What biases might be built in? Are we really comfortable with trading our privacy for untested AI predictions? Should a machine decide who might commit a crime? Because today it's about money laundering, tomorrow.
I'm of the mind that it's not something you can trade away. I think these are inherent rights. That's what our founding fathers outlined. Now, again, they didn't make that reality. They just argued these are inherent things that exist whether or not we write these things down, which is the way I think it's important to think of it like that. Because for me, that's why it's always aligned much more with, like I've always said, I do not believe in a state of society. I do not believe that we should live in a world where government dictates what your life should be like in any context. But I do argue that if we're forced to live in a society where we're forced to have a government, that we have the constitutional outline, I think, is the best dynamic. And I think what it shows you is that as a world in which these things are inherent, that you don't need them to, but that's the game they play, but they've slowly rolled you into a world where they tell you they can dictate these things and they can legislate them away, even though that is exactly the opposite of how they were outlined. That's why we've talked about in the past, like the actual Constitution, the actual Bill of Rights. Right? The idea being that the Bill of Rights is simply the first 10 amendments to the Constitution. And the point being, none of those 10 are contradictory to anything else in the Constitution. The point is, as Mayberry versus Madison ruled, and I think it was 1892, anything repugnant to the Constitution is null and void. That's a Supreme Court ruling that's been upheld. Problem is today, we already have many things that are directly contradictory to the Constitution. That's because our government is being infiltrated for something else. You could argue other than Israel. That's for you to decide. It's quite obvious, though, that they're being driven to not care about what is foundational to this country. And one by one, so if they all unanimously passed a law that said you couldn't own a gun, it wouldn't matter. It's repugnant to the Constitution, which is based on an inherent right that is not because they said, it's because it's a God-given right, inalienable. See the point? So we come to a reality today where they're now telling you that they can change these things. They cannot. But you have a bunch of screaming, girls at Elvis show kind of absurdities, right? Literally like the equivalent of throwing their underwear on a stage is the way they're acting with these Elons and Trumps. They just will not recognize that they're being played. I think most people, though, are beginning to see that. In this context of the Matt Kim video you just heard, just a thought shared, it's most definitely not just about money laundering already. Whitney shared this. This was on the 3rd in response to a Wired article that says AI can now predict crime before it happens. This guy says, no, it can't. She said under the last Trump administration, and this is the important point she always makes about this, this was rolled out in earnest under Trump's administration with Bill Barr, and just pre-crime. Very real. So there, if you're looking for precedent, if you're looking for something to connect the dot, it's coming from Trump to Trump at this point. Now, Biden played his role as well. I'm of the mind they're all in this together. But if you need to make it about one thing, this is obvious right now. But just hear me on that. I don't think this is unique to left and right, Trump or Biden. I think it's about your government passing this back and forth at, with so many ways to frame it. But it's the way they use them both to bring you down to a very specific, they condense you down into one specific thing. They want you in the middle, so they give you both extremes and drive you into it, make you think you made that choice. Under the last Trump administration, then AG Bill Barr legalized pre-crime prosecutions at the Department of Justice. In 2019, Trump called on social media to surveil users to identify would-be mass shooters before they commit any crime. How do we forget stuff like this? How do we forget his bump stock bill? How do we forget all the different things that clearly are so, it's like, it's such an obvious jump in the direction that you're on guard for on the other side that are still making moves, but so much far less. High Impact Flicks makes this point. That the bump stock ban, all these different things that he did that made legal owners suddenly criminals. If that happened on the left, it'd be this huge story. The point is they're both doing it. It's not unique to one side, but they're blinded to one side, sort of like the same thing in reverse. Why a lot of Democrats seem to be walking right into the medical problems. It's the same thing on either side. The problem is now what we're seeing is this kind of blend that really, I think what we're seeing is they're pulling out all the stops. I think we're The thing that a lot of people have been predicting for a long time, I mean, it's what's so hard to say because it's something that's been predicted. Maybe it'll be another 10 years for all we know. I'm of the mind that what we're about to see is coming soon. Not because it's just a logical conclusion, but because you're seeing all of the signs, the rushing of it, the exposing of what they do, the tearing down of their central narratives to bring you to this next step. That's why I see it kind of really clearly pulling out all the stops. But going forward, it says, I now worry that the main artificial intelligence predictive policing Palantir, which again, if you don't remember, is the main kind of influencing arm the Trump administration right now, that in Israel, I would argue, with multiple ties to the incoming administration and the CIA, or an equivalent going to be rolled out with law enforcement nationwide under the guise of addressing staff shortages. That's one, and increasing efficiency. Now, what's interesting is think about is, so now they're telling you, right, we need to get rid of all these people and save some money. And then all of a sudden that becomes a rationale for why we need some sort of digital fill-in, right? Or as we keep telling you, what do you think efficiency means in this age, guys? Every one of them that brought up efficiency, they were pointing at some sort of artificial intelligence or digital program. Is that what you thought when he told you he was going to make the government more? No, you were like, get rid of this company, get rid of that group. Nope. In most cases, I think maybe on the next show, but in most cases, they're adding things right now. Now, who knows? Maybe in the next so many months, they'll slash everything in half. Right now, they're pretending like they've saved all of these billions of dollars. Here's a screenshot. I think from what I can tell, they've done very little so far in the amounts to like actual money being cut down. They've been hiring different groups. They've added on more, just spent, or at least put forward a $500 billion bill for AI infrastructure. So let's not pretend like we're slashing funds right now. But these things are a means to an end. Problem, reaction, solution. Artificial intelligence is already being used to write police reports. Law enforcement management software, like the very spooky Mark 43, is already widely used by police departments, several of which have trialed Palantir's predictive policing functionally in real life. These AIs are not 90% accurate, absolutely less. But even if you believe those metrics, how do the erroneously targeted 10% explain their innocence for a crime that hasn't even happened? Think about how terrifying that is. So, if they're telling you you're guilty because AI says, sort of sounds like Israel murdering innocent people, doesn't it? Well, Lavender said that's what they were saying. I'm telling you, are we forgetting that Palantir is involved with that program? They're literally working with Israel on the ground to test this artificial intelligence program. It's coming to you. It says, don't fall for the convenience and the efficiency, sales pitches. AI pre-crime is the end of liberty. I agree. Now, I'll include the show. We talk about this because it's important to see the connection here. XAI, I'll just bring this up too since we're talking about it. This is DARPA's page, 2021. DARPA's explainable AI program, XAI, where it says they basically ended a 4-year research program right at the end of 2021. So many months later, into 2022, Elon Musk buys Twitter, turns it into X.com, which, by the way, was the old X.com, was the everything thing with the financial part they tried to build back then, and it is now X.com again, and starts an AI program called XAI, and they literally pretend that there's no connection. It is literally explainable AI. That's what this is. And if you look at this, what's under every post? XI, explain this post. Gee, what a weird coincidence. It's like total information awareness and Palantir. This is the DARPA extension into the private sector, so there's no accountability through Elon Musk that's being used to roll out everything, literally everything app. It's right in front of you. The quiet transition from DARPA's XAI to Elon's XAI. As Palantir, an AI-powered operations for every decision. I mean, everything they're doing is coming together right now, right in front of you. Here is just a thought, making a statement about DARPA, which this overlaps with the social media side of it. One of the main reasons that DARPA and U.S. intelligence created social media platforms, and you got to think about that big arc as well, right? Literally from the internet itself to social media platforms to the intelligence, explainable artificial intelligence, this is all through your government military technology apparatus that's we're being played. The reason they created them was to create, in her opinion, a global population of people who are too focused on followers and likes and manufacture dopamine hits through a screen to recognize what's happening around them. These screens are conditioning us to exist solely in our own echo chamber, which is what Twitter is on overdrive about right now, a virtual reality created for each and every one of us. That's kind of what I keep talking about in regard to what I think Twitter is. At some point later down the line, we're going to look back and go, that's what Ryan was talking about. Now it all, I just don't know how to verbalize it. But the point, it's like, it's not just different ads, right? We are being confronted with like literal different Twitters. Like we are being experimented on, in my opinion. And I think they're testing out to see how we can be corralled and how one thing here, or one thought, if this doesn't happen, or, all sorts of anomalies that overlap with the whole digital meta, digital twin dynamic. There's so much happening right now. If you think that sounds crazy, then God, you are way behind. These are public conversations. My point is about whether this is being done to you through Twitter in this moment, not whether it's happening. It's happening. This is public. Filled with information and images demanding our constant attention. A reality where we can look and act and be perceived differently than in our everyday lives. An escape from all of the mundane, depressing, and overwhelming aspects of society, despite the fact that it has provably shown to make you far more depressed. A society that has been built to seek an exit sign at all costs. But while our eyes are glued to our screens, a surveillance and AI system is being built around us. One that will track and control individuals like never before. I think it's a reactionary thing, guys. I think they're terrified of us right now. This is not hidden, nor is it hyperbole. It is happening at alarmingly fast rates. We will look away from our phones and computers in time to realize, will we look away in time to realize what's happening? I don't know, she says. I'm here typing this through a screen, after all. But I agree. And I think it's being built around us as we see, as we type, speak, and engage. I think it's important to still use this, but it's important to pull yourself out of this as often as possible. But I really do think that's correct. I think what's happening is because people are pulling away from it. It's not having the effect that it has been over the years. So they need to find a new, like as Garland Nixon said, it's a corporate reorganization. They're literally deciding they need to roll out the new system. Isn't that exactly what Klaus Schwab told us? Right, but he said it in the Bond villain voice. So now we're looking for the Elon voice before we start accepting it. Well, as we've talked about, here's the exact example. This is we already showed you this before, from 2014. Air Force research, how to use social media to control people like drones. Can you guess who ran this program? DARPA. Facebook isn't the only organization conducting research into how attitudes are affected by social media. The Department of Defense has invested millions of dollars over the past few years investigating social media, social networks, and how information spreads across them. They were researching it, and Elon and Twitter and XAI is the rolling out of this experiment. That's what I think. While Facebook and Cornell University researchers manipulated what individuals saw in their social media streams, military-funded research, including projects from DARPA, it's called Social Media in Strategic Communications Program, has looked primarily into how messages from influential members of social networks propagate. Guys, how are we missing this? Now, that doesn't have to mean that they know they're doing it, right? Like an Ian Carroll, for example. Is that deliberate? Is he even aware? Is this an effort to use them without knowing? The point is they've researched how to use influential entities to control the flow of information, to control the message. How is that not more transparently right now where we are than anything we've ever talked about? It says a paper entitled Containment Control for a Social Network with State-Dependent Connectivity. State-dependent connectivity. The research demonstrates that the mathematical principles used to control groups of autonomous robots can be applied to social networks in order to control human behavior. I mean, there's so much more. I plan to go more into this. I said that in the past, but I wanted to bring that up for this just on a quick point. Very important to see. Richie Allen points out, and this is what I think he might have nailed it right here. Lockdowns in a different way. Internet lockdowns are coming, he says, and sooner than we think. And he's talking from the UK perspective. The Labour Party will introduce a bill before next election to give the Home Office the power to temporarily limit the public's access to social media sites during a significant news event. They'll say this is necessary to maintain public order and prevent the spread of harmful misinformation. Internet lockdowns are coming, and neither Musk nor Zuckerberg will do anything about it. Now, of course, you'll tell yourself that Musk wouldn't do that, or they're not stopping they don't care about woke. Well, see, if you only look at it from one angle and miss how they're doing the same thing in regard to anti-Semitism, hate speech through ADL, it's the same thing, guys. So the bottom line, all of a sudden, there's a major event. Let's just call it a very serious anti-Semitic event. And all of a sudden they go, well, we have to kind of pull back on this because we're being overrun with anti-Semitic misinformation. And that will be in combination with the anti-Semitism executive order that I believe is coming. There's already bills all over the country that are unconstitutional, like in Texas, anti-BDS and so on. I mean, it's right on the surface. These are literally unconstitutional. They're telling you can't say things that they don't want you to say because Israel doesn't want you to say them. Even if you think they're even if they're the most racist thing in the world, you have a right to say what you want. That's free speech. The actual free speech we discuss, not the fake limited dynamic Twitter pretends is free speech. So I think he's right. I think we're going to get to a point to where something, whether this by itself or kind of merges with a couple of other events, which is kind of where I see this going. This you might find especially interesting. Vivek decided to break his silence on Musk and Doge exit. There's only a few things in there that really stand out to me, but I do think that they're clear. Now, again, the point I always think is funny is the Q type people that will make whatever they want out of the most obscure nonsense to make it into something. Will get a message from somebody who pretty clearly seems to be trying to send a message and never connect those dots. Here's what it says. We had different, they asked him, like, what happened? Right, in regard to why he denied a falling out with Elon Musk. He wanted, because remember, he was supposed to be the co-lead of Doge, and then he just dropped away and saying, I'm going to run for Congress. But Musk alluded to like firing him. It was weird. So here he says, we had different and complementary approaches. Whereas Musk examined the issue through a technological mindset, I focused more on a constitutional law legislative-based approach. Oh, good. So he's rolling out technocracy, and you at least pretend you were fighting for constitutional law. That's a pretty big statement if you really want to listen to it. Technological mindset, isn't that exactly what we all were pretending we were fighting? So many of us actually were during COVID-19, during the Great Reset, still to this day. If you had to choose between a constitutional law mindset and a technological mindset, what do you think most conservatives would tell you they would fight for if it wasn't involving Elon Musk? You damn well know. To me, that's straight up him throwing Elon Musk under the bus because I think he got pushed out. And he's telling you, these guys are not fighting for your rights. That's what I think. You could decide for yourself. Well, I'm sure we'll get more as this boils over and we see him, potentially go into Congress. But it says, asked point blank about reports that Musk had fired him, Ramaswamy claimed his abrupt departure stemmed from a mutual discussion. Well, that's not what Elon basically said. So he goes on to say, we're on the same page. Divide and conquer. That's what he said. In saving the country, it's not a one-man show from the top down to the bottom up. It's all the above. And that's what I'm in for. No, that's not even remotely true. It's 100% top down in this country. But what's funny, and he damn well knows that, by the way, we're on the same page, divide and conquer. I mean, guys, it's just so obvious. These people are manipulators. Like the whole peace through strength dynamic they're pushing, which is, I'll show you tomorrow, which literally, that's Netanyahu. Total victory, peace through strength that Musk to Trump is just regurgitating. That's where that comes from. It's not unique to Netanyahu, but it's what he's been screaming since for a long time. But I think that's pretty telling, if you ask me. Now, Stargate, if you didn't already know, is important because this is the project. I mean, Catherine Austin Fitts called this Warp Speed 2.0 from the mRNA side of this, but I agree with the bigger picture as 2.0. It's not just about another shot. It's about the shot and the overlap with the technocratic direction. Whether we're talking nanotechnology, whether we're talking about the artificial intelligence tracking of it all, which, by the way, as Whitney covered, was already going on with Oracle, with Moncef Slaoui, Larry Ellison. This was already happening after COVID-19. That's what Oracle was doing. They were tracking the pharmacovigilance. They know damn well about all of the horrifying things that happened to you, and they're rolling out another shot to deal with it. We'll do one for the cancers we caused, right? My point, though, is that this is what they're rolling out. The AI control, as I called it over here, the AI biomedical control grid. But as Derek wrote, Stargate, Trump partners with technocrats to promote mRNA injections, AI, and transhumanism, right? So you've got SoftBank representative, that's Israel. I mean, I went over this pretty clearly. SoftBank is extensively overlapped with Israel in a lot of different ways, including financially backing their startup entity, which in my aspect, which in my opinion is the way Unit 8200 and Mossad essentially infiltrate other countries. Literally rolling out these startups and openly telling you they're doing so with the interest of Israeli government. And if you say that, though, you're racist, even though they publicly say it in interviews. So that's SoftBank. So the CEO is the chair of the whole thing, and SoftBank is the financial side of it. To me, that's Israel. Then you got Larry Ellison for Oracle, which is the deep state, which is surveillance, which is the same entity we just talked about, overlapping, by the way, also with Israel, but clearly the COVID-19 surveillance dynamic and all these things were. Imagine if Biden rolled all these out. I'd say it's almost tired of even saying that. You damn well know they would be losing their minds over it. Or, of course, Sam Altman with WorldCoin, OpenAI, ChatGPT. You know what? Elon Musk tells you he's going to end the world. But that all lines up, though. Right? We're winning, guys. We're winning. Can't you tell? Well, David Icke says, in regard to Disclosed TV, telling you that OpenAI launches ChatGPT for the government. Yeah. You just can't. I told you so. Just kind of losing its meaning here. For U.S. government agencies. Great. So NSA, CIA, National Reconnaissance Office, now they get to use their artificial intelligence to run their government agencies, allowing the agencies to feed non-public sensitive information into AI models in secure environments. Oh, great. This is your technocracy. If you're still pretending this is not exactly what it looks like, you're lying to yourself. You know what you're looking at. You know what this is. If it was Biden or anybody else, you would already be calling out. Call it out. You really, I mean, is it really about winning to the point to where you allow the technocratic control structure to ruin your life so Trump doesn't fail? Is that really what you're doing? David Icke says, as I keep warning, AI is taking over government, which is exactly what the Trump regime and his tech oligarchs are there to do while they divert you with the "we're winning" propaganda. Trump rolls out the AI biomedical control grid backed by Israel and the deep state. That's what this is. Truth Stream Media highlights June Slater saying, and I showed you this before, this is from the 23rd of January. She says, what if, ... they're deliberately letting street crime, knife attacks, repeated shoplifting get worse so that we welcome more surveillance. Instead of policing wrongdoers, they get the opportunity to police all of us. Now, sadly, I think they're looking at this from like the Democrats. That's what I kind of get the sense of, but it's not. It's your government using you like this. And they simply said, well, that's how the biometric entry exit wall will get a public seal of approval. After years of unimpeded illegal immigration and border agents, both sides of your government, pretending they're suddenly forgot their jobs, cutting fences and fist bumping people on the way in. Remember with the Texas point, right? With all those buoys with razors on them and everyone's all up in arms. And this guy drove down the road and was like, there's like 3 fences swinging in the wind. Nobody's standing here. Not immigrants, not government, not border patrol. So why are all the immigrants huddled around the one place where all the border patrol are? Why? We're being lied to. Like he was a Republican. He was like, guys, we're being manipulated. He's like, yep, that's where we are. Problem, reaction, solution. That's in no way to say that that's not an important discussion or that immigration, they know that and still they're lying to you about it, guys. They're using it to trick you. Well, on this point, let's ask ourselves, how do you think this connects, right? Well, if they need to identify, punish, and deport anti-Semites, how do you think they do that? Well, if you didn't already see, Trump is ordering a review to identify, punish, and deport anti-Semites. Now, this is exactly what we already told you was coming because he told you he would do this. At every rally where he was speaking to Israeli lobbyists or with Israeli flags behind him, with Miriam Adelson sitting 3 feet behind him at every rally with Vance behind him, because that makes sense. He kept telling you he's going to get rid of the Jew haters. He's going to deport all these people. Every one of the things he's saying, wildly unconstitutional. And that's not even remotely to say the same as supporting what gross people would say that have racist mindsets. Still is a right to be able to think and say what you want. The same things you guys would say in certain contexts if you're only on a partisan side. The problem here is that this is and by the way, don't forget, this person here is the one that is filled the role with Massey out of the way. And she is a rabid Zionist, pro-Israel defender. So Trump orders review to identify, punish, and deport anti-Semites. How many times did we hear that was never going to happen? That he's tricking Israel, or that's not true. He never even said it, or whatever the narrative was. Just like it was a troll to rename the goal. Oh, too late, that happened. Oh, we were just trolling you about running for a third term. No, that's being introduced, right? Or what about putting Trump's face on Mount Rushmore? Yeah, whether you guys think these are trolling all the way until you make it a reality or not, they're real. It's happening. They're actually introducing legislation to add Trump's face to Mount Rushmore. And I honestly think it literally probably is them just trying to get a rise, but it's real. Even if it is still a troll, they're actually doing it. It's just crazy to me. So I don't see, the point is, I think with stuff like that, they absolutely want that. They absolutely think that's cool and absolutely think it should happen, but also feel really dumb and childish because it's dumb and childish and it's a stupid thing to put forward because it's not about you liking them and adding them to the wall, guys. It's about the historical meaning of it. And I'm not even saying I support them. I mean, it's lunacy to watch these children in the room act like they're the leading people in the conversation. The point, though, is I think that's all distracting. You're being played by thinking that's a fun thing to talk about. Bottom line is it's about what's being built around you while you yell about things like that. This is pretty much the most important thing in this conversation right now. I don't think I highlighted anything here. We talked about this all the way back on the immigration, the border conversation with the SAVE Act, right? Which is one part of it. Using the immigration dynamic that I think is being completely facilitated through Israel, with obvious examples I've shown you more than once, to flood. And as they talk about it, that's what I think is so ridiculous. Every time I bring it up, I guarantee somebody thinks I just hate Jewish people, even though it's so spectacularly not the case. Clearly fighting alongside Jews and Muslims and Christians to call out what we're all calling out, the Zionist genocide. But the point is that it's obvious to see Israeli government entities literally talking about this. Having the chief rabbi of Ben Gvir and Smotrich literally say how they're causing immigration in this country openly. The point, though, is all of it aside, the reality is I think it's obviously being weaponized, but you decide that for yourself about why. The point is, on this side of it, we can see our government already trying to utilize that to roll out the things we tell you are coming. Digital ID, for example. That was the SAVE Act, Real ID, ID 2020. All these things are big, major red flags. They're all coming together. This was about the idea of trying to do it because, the election, hurry, get it done. Until Thomas Massey put the air out of that and said, well, this won't even be done before the election. Too late. Well, they're still going to roll it out. They're still going to try. So the point is, this all comes together with this obvious conversation about rolling out arguably one more element that will then force them to argue they need to identify X, Y, and Z, right? Well, I'll show you a second what I already pointed to, which is even being denied because it's uncomfortable, about a veteran already being arrested or detained for the most part because he was brown, because they weren't using warrants. Exactly like we were telling you, that this is a broad, militaristic, police state sweeping of just anybody they want to go after. Stop, let's do stop and frisk, he kept telling you, even though that's wildly unconstitutional. Sort of like the rest of the stuff. Get the guns, deal with process later. Burn the flag, go to jail. All unconstitutional. But you guys cheer it on because Trump said it. Here we have the example of all these building to the idea where they can use this to force you to acquiesce to whatever the new digital structure is. Facial scans, social credit. This is there. They're all talking about it. David Icke says, what First Amendment? The free speech hero, right? Israel-owned Trump ordering review to identify, punish, and deport anti-Semites, including students on visas. Who decides what's anti-Semitic? He does. No, or Israel does. The fake free speech advocates cheer their God King without a smear of embarrassment. It's pretty sad. But remember, the many times, I guess I'll come back to it. I'm trying to think if I should just play that first so you could hear it. Yeah, I might as well. So I think I've got it right here. Yeah. So the point, though, in case you don't know, I mean, just to make it very clear, like, so discussing the idea of removing, now there's a big focus on, foreign students and visas, but I'll read, it's very clear. There's an obvious opening for people who they just argue need to be removed because they are, they really blend the idea of what they want you to think is some kind of Hamas supporting terrorist. Now, even with students, by the way, whether foreign students on visas or not, and I made this point the other day, even illegal immigrants, in some cases, as the Supreme Court has more than once stood by, are protected in some cases under the Constitution. And that's an extreme, that's it's somebody who's even here illegally. And has been cases, but they've been more than once argued that they apply in certain cases. My point is that people here on student visas, well, they absolutely still are protected under the constitutional rights. And the bottom line is that you can't just argue, we don't like what you think, therefore you have to leave. But then, of course, there people will argue that they're here on visas. Fine. Even though you're wrong. The point is, what we're talking about in my mindset is the argument he's already made, which I'll play for you now, that they're talking about people who simply, they frame as Jew haters, even though what they're actually framing is people that support Palestine, which I'm sure there's an overlap somewhere. But my point is that almost entirely misrepresenting people that simply want to fight for Palestinian self-determination, most of which I can see don't feel the way they claim they do. In fact, are actively fighting for a peaceful resolution for all. They just don't like that because that's not what they want. The point, though, is that this is unconstitutional. This is a violation of your rights and is being rolled out for a foreign country at the expense of your rights.
We will remove the jihadist sympathizers and Jew haters. We're going to remove the Jew haters who do nothing to help our country. They only want to destroy our country. And we will never let the horrors of October 7th be repeated here on American soil. We will not let that happen, and we will solve the problem that we have.
Now, let me be very clear. Let's just even say somebody has negative, you hate this country. I mean, realize that what we're talking about are feelings and thoughts. At the same time, we're talking about pre-crime. Like, does that not make you uncomfortable? I get the idea that we love to be all maximalist about this and pretend, well, we can't let people in our country that don't like our country. I mean, that's lunacy, guys. There's people all over the world that travel in many different contexts that don't love or hate. There's a lot of reason people have to hate this government. You have a right to feel there's Americans that live in this country that clearly hate this government. Maybe they think it's only one half of it. Maybe those that are aware enough to see that it's all the government. Nonetheless, you're telling us that people who don't want who hate, that don't have to share the same ideology or don't like the same thing. That's what they're ultimately talking about. I think Kirk just recently said the same thing. That we don't want you here if you don't share the same. Like, you guys are the extremists in this conversation. What you're doing is framing this as you have to think and feel just like we do, or you're not welcome here. Doesn't that start to feel a little bit eerie, like the past examples we've seen in history? I mean, they're the ones projecting this on everybody else while they act in the most extremist, what's the right word for that? Like, it's just extremism, guys. It's what they're doing. And you're telling us that people aren't allowed to dislike this country, right? Or have a certain feeling about certain people, or hate certain groups, or want to support Palestine, which is what you pretend that is all those things. It's infuriating, guys. So, and again, the point that I'm making clear is that let's just say you're a person out there that hates Jewish people. I think you're disgusting for randomly hating people just because of their religion. It's not ethnicity, by the way. It's a religion. My point, though, is that you would still have a right to feel that way. And I would defend that right, even though I would think you're disgusting. It's as simple as that. Anyone who thinks anyone who argues something else, which you have a right to, you don't believe in free speech, though. Simple as that. And we can have a conversation about that, but pretending you do is just dishonest. You believe in limited speech, even if it's only the one thing you're talking about. Simple as that. And that's how they abuse this conversation. And then, guys, this clip, there's so many different clips in here of him saying basically the same thing in different ways. Here's the one where he says he believes Israel rightly supposed to control Congress. It's not a joke.
The biggest change I've seen in Congress is Israel literally owned Congress. You understand that 10 years ago, 15 years ago. And it was so powerful. It was so powerful. And I think you know exactly what I'm saying. They had such power. Israel had such power, and rightfully, over Congress.
And then it goes to the second clip where he says basically the same thing in a different way. rightfully over Congress. And it's not taken out of context. I mean, I've gone through the whole thing. It's just funny how people who just don't want to admit it, don't like what it shows, will always just assume that it must be something else. There must be a reason why it's not what I think I'm seeing right there, and then never follow up because they prefer to leave it ambiguous because otherwise they have to address what just happened. That's partisanship for you. Idris Ali points out Guantanamo Bay. You know, the shining beacon of freedom in this country, right? Trump announces that he's ordering the Department of Defense and the Department of Homeland Security to begin preparing Guantanamo Bay to hold 30,000 migrants. I mean, that's just, I mean, from a logistical standpoint, it's a usable spot. But just think about using Guantanamo Bay to move a bunch of immigrants into after our history there. Guys, it's just grotesque what these people are doing. And on top of that, which I'll show you right now, I guarantee you there are going to be people that end up there that do not belong there, whether because they're not an illegal immigrant or whatever else, or that there are people that languish there for longer than they're supposed to because they don't know what to do. It's just unreal where we are right now in this country. And it says Guantanamo Bay already has migrant housing facility that is separate from where 9/11 detainees are held. Good story on the facilities that are there. Go right. It's already set up for you. Good job. Almost like they've been preparing. Well, as I showed you the other day, here's one example already. 23rd of January, city of Newark. An ICE raid ended up detaining a U.S. military veteran who suffered the indignity of having his legitimacy of his military documentation questioned. Now, you may argue this is a small example, guys. Now, but the main point is they came in and actually, I'll read it from here since this gets into more detail. That's just the post from the city of Newark. It is real. It's what they're reporting. Now, of course, maybe they're lying, right? Maybe they made a mistake, as always. That's anybody honest is going to consider those things, right? But not ignore it in lieu of those things. Consider both sides of it. Lean in for the facts. January 24th, mayor accuses ICE of detaining vet. Now, it says, ICE agents entering the Ocean Food Depot restaurant where owner Louis Janota said around a dozen immigration authorities detained 3 people after receiving a complaint. Great. So now we're going to basically SWAT people so I see people that are brown that I mean, how would you even know? Certainly there may be an insight. Maybe somebody who works there did, right? But you know this is going to get out of control if this is the kind of thing that will happen. And it is based on what you see here. It says, I asked the agents what documentation they were looking for, and they said it was a license or passport. And he goes, I thought, who walks around with a passport? And it says, Janota said among the workers questioned was the manager of the restaurant's warehouse, a Puerto Rican man and a military veteran. Exactly what I thought. Turns out he was brown. Puerto Ricans are U.S. citizens. It says, it looks to me like they were specifically going after certain kinds of people, not every kind, because they did not ask for me for my documentation or my American workers, Portuguese workers, or white workers. Now, from a very objective point, you're going to say, well, yes, because you're probably not an immigrant. But how do they know that? Right? If you're going to be honest about this, is it not possible that you were an immigrant from Germany? Or are we only worried about certain kinds of immigrants? I mean, let's be real about this, guys. It's very easy to try to sidestep this because, racism is supposed to be only for the woke Democrats, but no, it's just human beings that care about people, right? And it does exist. And a lot of it right now is being ignored on very clearly one side of this paradigm. The problem is, and by the way, it's on all sides of this in a lot of different ways, but right now they're the power structure that's leading the charge, and it's important to call out. Here, it's important to recognize that what they're doing is apparently without warrants, by the way, according to the mayor of Newark, they just took people without warrants and went after people that were brown. One of them was a U.S. veteran. So if that can happen so easily right out of the gate, how do we not see where this is already going? And it says, U.S. immigration and ICE may encounter U.S. citizens while conducting field work and may request identification to establish an individual identity, as was the case during the targeted enforcement. So basically they're saying we can ask you, just so it's clear, you are not required to produce identification. Constitutionally speaking. Now, yes, there's all sorts of laws, but that's my point from before. If it is repugnant to the Constitution, it's null and void. That doesn't mean they won't arrest you and put you in jail because all of your congressional they all don't seem to care, which shows you how far away we are from any reality of constitutional law. I wonder why. What other government out there is driving us into the ground? or putting people in positions of power that don't care about the Constitution, but pretend they do. You know exactly. My point is, what they're telling you is we may ask you for your identification, and you're now required to produce it. And if you don't, we'll probably assume you're an immigrant. Get ready. It's going to get crazy. It says this is an active investigation. And per ICE policy, we cannot discuss ongoing investigation. Oh, you got to love that, right? Except when we want to, and we'll let a woman walk through the crime scene before we're even done investigating, for propaganda. Or we pretend we don't want. It's just so inconsistent all the time, everywhere. But it says, by the numbers, ICE said on Twitter, it arrested 538 people Thursday, detained 373, but it did not say where those raids were conducted. It says Baca accused ICE of an egregious act and of violating the Fourth Amendment. Now, I closed it already, but from this, and it's in the article as well. The point is, he says right here, without producing a warrant. So you already know where this goes. We're watching the police state powers grow out of control right in front of you, or really just become what we know they are, but we're watching them roll it out under the guise of doing what you want. Now, of course, when Democrats speak up and say they're violating the rights, they go, oh, you're a woke, immigrant-loving, blah, blah, blah. It's the same dumb stuff you get back and forth, right? So something happens the other way, and the Democrats go, you're just a white supremacist Nazi. You're both stupid. You're both ignorant. You're both lying to yourselves about what's really going on so you can ignore what's right in front of you, that your government, all of it, is tricking both of you. That's what's actually happening. And we can't see it as they remove your rights in front of you. Greg Stoker points out, ICE can now raid churches, schools, and hospitals. When we talk about the imperial boomerang theory, this is what we mean. You thought normalizing the bombing of every institution in Gaza wouldn't come back to the imperial core? Trump administration to allow ICE to raid previously protected spaces. Well, we're already seeing that. Are you okay with this? I mean, just turn it around in some other dynamic. Imagine if it was some kind of woke dynamic that was enforcing some element that you didn't agree with, was forcing this into locations and you're Republican. I mean, it doesn't have to always be so cut and dry or so different. Like, the reality is, you can see this is a power structure that is abusing its power, even if you agree with the outcome. It's what we keep talking about. They're just doing so in ways they know you'll agree with by and large. So then you basically agree with them abusing their power one step at a time, pulling further and further away from what we pretend they're bound by. And as long as it, makes them feel stupid, or we're winning, or the Democrats look bad, people cheer it on. Now, I really hope people that may be new to the show have been looking back at our work and realize that it's not just all Republican. It's what the current, when it was Biden and COVID-19 or whatever else, we were making a point about that leading element. It's the same thing as far as you go back. It's just important to see that it's just simply about the guiding aspect of it that I think is truly with one ultimate agenda. Now, of course, J.D. Vance has blustering response for Catholic bishops who criticized ICE raids in churches. Think about this, guys. You've got bishops who are criticizing, rightly so, that they've allowed raids into churches. Right? I mean, historically, even well before even our current dynamic, there was what's it called? Dude, I'm blanking on the word. But you could go into a church and basically call safe haven. Right? Like, you could basically, from any kind of other, basically that you would have some kind of a protected element, and people respected that. Not today, apparently. So where are all the Christians out there who, with all these lines being crossed, but it's okay because bad immigrants? Sanctuary is the word I was looking for. It's a classic concept, but apparently no more. Now, bottom line, though, is that you have Catholic churches, bishops who are saying, well, this is a travesty. Even if you're going after immigrants that are illegal, what you're doing is a big deal. And Vance makes it about their money. Now, I'll be the first person to point out that there's a whole lot of corruption and profiteering in the Catholic Church. But think about coming from somebody right now pretending to lead the Christian right, pretending to be a Christian. I don't think any of these people are what they pretend they are. How can you be a Christian and then Catholic bishops speak up about you violating the sanctity of these churches, and you say, oh, you're worried about your money? That sounds like what you think. That sounds like what you are. And what we're watching is a bunch of technocrat, elitist oligarchs who are literally pretending to be Christians, pretending to be free speech advocates, pretending to not be the government fighting against you. Asylum would work too, Katie. That's actually, I was thinking sanctuary, not as the sanctuary city part, but like historically, just look it up. Like the sanctuary is an idea that churches would essentially protect you from persecution, things like that. But I guess that doesn't matter anymore. But as the squirrel points out, it goes, wow, Trump will sign an executive order to deport anyone with a student visa who spreads transphobia, homophobia, anti-Black racism, and Islamophobia. Oh, wait, it's only to deport anyone criticizing Israel and spreading anti-Semitism because, of course, and conservatives cheer. The point he's making is simply that if you're going to argue, like, why would it be select, right? Why would it only be about one level, one angle of it? I think we all know why. And that in and of itself is hypocrisy. It says it really is curious that anti-Semitism, by which is meant, of course, criticism of Zionism and the genocidal Israeli death cult, is the only hate speech Trump recognizes, constantly hysterically whines about and wants to criminalize. Think about that. So this is the woke right on display. Again, he says, I have to stress, all of this is just random. It's totally random that the first foreign leader Trump invited to the White House is Netanyahu. It's totally random that the only right-wing politicians and parties that are allowed to win are Zionists. Don't look any further. It's just a strange, weird coincidence. Totally arbitrary, completely random that the only time Elon Musk has profusely apologized and he says cucked himself over a tweet was in relation to one specific group of people. Totally random. You can decide for yourself. Unusual Whales says, just in, Trump administration will cancel student visas of all Hamas sympathizers on college campuses. Another thing he said, Hamas sympathizers. So now you're not allowed to sympathize? And how do you define sympathy? Is it support? Or just, feeling bad for what they're going through? I mean, it's just ridiculous. Bottom line is, obviously, you have the right to support whatever group you want. I don't care if you're talking about ISIS. If you want to say I sympathize with what they're going through, suddenly now you're not allowed in this country. Lines being crossed all over the place. It's alarming how few people speak up about some of this stuff. I really put it like this. It's alarming how many people profess to care about the Constitution and then are too cowardly to stand up when it challenges like this. It's easy to stand up for the easy moments, right? It's when it's moments like this that matter. Glenn says, any serious critic of Israel is automatically deemed a Hamas sympathizer. And that's the point. Not critical of Jews, critical of Israel's government actions. Now, look, if you're pretending like there's just no part in the world that's possible, like that there's not somebody out there who is capable of saying, look, Israel's government committed a crime, because of course that's totally not possible, right? At the same time, doesn't hate Jews. Like, are we willing to admit that's possible out there? All you Zionist manipulators, is there someone in the world who doesn't hate Jews who can go, yes, but Israel's government committed a crime? Apparently not, because apparently no matter where you look in the world, anybody says Israel just did this and that's illegal, oh, you're racist. That's the best they can do. And it worked for a really long time. The reality is, as far as I could tell, the vast majority are people who just want to see them stop killing children. But they're racist, apparently, for saying that. This is, by design, he says, intended to condition work and study in the U.S. on either vocally expressing love for Israel or staying silent, courtesy of the people claiming to restore free speech in the United States. Some people have the courage to call it out. Where are you guys at? I think the majority sees this, but what I'm talking to when I say that are the people who are staying quiet when you know better. And you know who I'm talking. You hear me right now. I'm not even saying somebody specific. I'm just hoping that you're out there listening and you believe I'm talking about you. Daniel McAdams, change the definition of anti-Semitism to include anyone critical of the actions of the secular Israeli government and then deny free speech to those newly government-minted anti-Semites. He says, I thought we were entering a new era of free speech. Isn't this the golden age for America? We're keep being told. No, we're taking leaps and bounds in the wrong direction, but just screaming freedom. How often have we talked about that? And then the point they're talking about is, given that the U.S. government has effectively adopted the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism, which basically means you can't say Zionism is Judaism, which is like literal. That's like saying black is white. It's ridiculous. It's fundamentally, objectively wrong. Zionism is a political organization, so many hundreds of years old. Judaism is 3,500 years old. Okay, are we confused? They're not the same thing. So the fact that they're so aggressively forcing people to pretend they are when you know they're not is in and of itself proof of what we're talking about. When you have morons like Brian Mass, or people screaming that it's the same thing, it's simply not. You're wrong. Plenty of Orthodox Jews in the world are calling that out, but they just keep pushing to their own detriment, by the way. Maybe not in the immediacy of them getting showered with Israeli praise and funding, but at some point they're going to come around and recognize that they have zero support in this country other than extremists. Maybe that's all they care about. Tiberius says worst possible timeline. So this guy's saying Trump to sign an executive order, identify, punish, and deport anti-Semites. Here's Elon Musk with his 100%. Rabbit hole, same thing. Says universities manufacture woke activists, and it shows kids walking in and college pumping them out. Like, do you think he just doesn't see how stupid that is? Like, do you think he doesn't recognize? No, I don't think so. I think he's very aware of what he's doing. Right? The game is to go the left and the Democrats and, oh, look, Muslim pedophile, look over there. Right? The point, though, is that you're literally doing that. You're in real time doing that, creating a situation where people get pumped out, but just in a different way. But if you get people on guard to only look for one thing, it's what I was saying before. All these people screaming, oh, look at Malay, screaming about two genders. He won. He beat them all. They're laughing at you all. They're making fun of you. In fact, Malay probably is too, because they're going, how stupid can you be? That all we have to do is get up and pretend we speak against the woke agenda when what they're doing is literally building a technocratic prison around you. And we're going, yay, fight against that. Look, there are real things to talk about there, obviously, because there are real actions that are at me. If you don't know, look at my work on it. It's monumentally important to highlight what was going on, like through the trans agenda. But realize that the people that were using those things are not fighting for multiple names in your genders, guys. They're fighting to get you in division tactics, to get you fighting yourselves, to get you normalized with the idea of transhumanism, all sorts of different things that go so far beyond Malay telling you there's two genders. Hooray, we're winning. Same point here. If you only focus on the one element of it, as you literally ignore the Zionist control of the structure as they roll this out, it's technocracy at the end of the day, globalism, then you're missing the bigger picture. And that's not to say that this doesn't matter. It's to say that's only a fraction of the bigger picture. But just how funny it is that that in the timeline's perfect. Adam simply says, breaking, President Trump to sign executive order to identify, punish, and deport anti-Semites. After 249 years of existence, Israel has now officially destroyed the First Amendment. Now, I get what he's saying. I don't agree. The point is that's not something that can be destroyed. It's an inherent God-given right that's always there. It's about whether or not your government is respecting your rights. And they're not. And they're not for a foreign government. Clearly matters. Here is an Israeli Zionist supporter who is doing, they're using this because this is the game. Promises made, promises kept. And here's what he says. The Trump administration is actively working to identify, punish, and deport pro-terror students. Right. So was it a promise kept, or was that something they were pretending was never going to happen? Right. Where I would go, look at what Trump's going to do. And they're like, no, you're wrong. He'll never do that. He's a free speech warrior. He's fighting for the Constitution. He cares about us. And then rolls out the same thing. Now, yes, you're going to get the extremists in his circle that are fighting for Zionism. They're going to go, yeah, like this guy. But is that a promise you thought he was making and now you're glad he kept? By and large, I would argue no. I think most conservatives are going, damn it, this does not feel right. Whether or not you agree with what they pretend these people are supporting or not. You know damn well in your heart that that you only believe in free speech if you're willing to defend the worst of speech, period. And so this guy is trying to get you on this train. And really, it's about Zionists going, we're winning. And then and then people are following along. But let's talk about this from Haaretz. Okay, this is Haaretz covering this point. Trump's executive order on anti-Semitism to largely focus on pro-Palestinian protesters. Funny how Haaretz has shown itself through all of this, surprisingly enough, to be like the only voice willing to highlight somewhat the truth of Israel itself. Meanwhile, your Western politicians and media are cowardly hiding on the other side of this conversation. Well, Israel's Haaretz newspaper, one of the leading papers in Israel, is calling it out more than anybody. And they'll talk about a story as if it's not happening, and they'll blatantly tell in the headline, killed him, I mean, how many different stories from the Flower Massacre, openly telling you what's happening, and you got morons like Matt Miller pretending like we don't know for sure, as it's being publicly stated by an IDF member. As always, they know what they're doing. Matt Miller knows what he's doing. Now, either they sleep like a baby because they're an absolute sociopath, or I hope they struggle every night to sleep because they're such a horrible person. I hope they struggle, but something tells me they don't. Trump's executive order. A White House document obtained by Haaretz shows that Trump executive order aims to take unprecedented steps to combat, quote, the explosion of anti-Semitism, which we've already proven. And the term, the name, the everything comes from that one claim of 400%. The cloud of, oh yeah, that turned out to be all Palestinian flags, Palestinian protests. Anybody saying anything even Palestinian adjacent was deemed an anti-Semitic event, and then was included in that number. Just like when they spoke to everybody that was a January 6th, and every one of those interviews was a domestic terrorism interview. They got a spike of domestic terrorism. Same thing. It's so easy. But of course, people that want to believe it will pretend it's the case, like the Democrats did at that time. And now we got Republicans leaning into this because it works. You all fall for it because partisan manipulation seems to be the game. Bottom line, explosion of anti-Semitism was nothing of the kind. It was a bunch of lies and manufactured illusions, which we're going to get into next, because that's what they do. The ADL, Zionism, and the Israeli government. It says, including the ability to revoke student visas. It says, according to the White House fact sheet obtained by Haaretz, Trump's order, quote, takes forceful and unprecedented steps to marshal all federal resources to combat the explosion of anti-Semitism on our campuses, in our streets since October 7th. So even right there, because, you get the talking points, and that becomes only students, only foreign. That's not what it says. If you look at this, if you read it, it's clear that he says all federal resources to combat the explosion. Okay, so right there, in and of itself, is not constitutional. To combat racism is not constitutional. People have a right to think and feel what they want, especially since we know that what they're aiming at is not even actually racism. It's simply support for Palestine. My point either way, as always, is you have a right to feel and think what you want. They're simply telling you you do not if it has to do with Israel. Got to be the most obvious thing we've ever seen. Your government tells you you can't do what you want if you bump up against Israel. You have your rights, but not if you're going to say things bad about Israel, right? You can protest, but not if it's about Israel, right? You can have support from this hurricane, but only if you sign pledging not to go against Israel. That was Texas. Governor Abbott during Harvey. We talked about this then. People were signing things saying you had to pledge not to boycott Israel, otherwise you wouldn't get government aid from your tax dollars. My God, this has to be so obvious. But going forward, it says the order notably sees through Trump's campaign vow to deport pro-Palestinian protesters in America on student visas, the administration's latest dramatic step with significant implications on First Amendment issues and immigration policy. Great how the Israeli platform is the one, seemingly the only one willing to call this out. But it says, I will issue clear orders to my attorney general, another pro-Zionist manipulator, to aggressively prosecute terroristic threats, arson, vandalism, violence against American Jews. So right there, the point is, this is what he's saying, not exactly what's written. The bottom line is what this ends up being is the broad, people will take it as only if they break the law. But that's not what it says. It just does not only, it says simply, it's a lot of vague language to combat anti-Semitism. But it says to all the resident aliens who joined in the pro-jihadist protest, which is not what they were. It's dishonest at its core. And frankly, I think he knows that. We put you on notice. It says, come 2025, we will find you and we will deport you. I will also quickly cancel the student visas of all Hamas sympathizers on calendar. So right there, it's very clear, which have been infested with radicalism. So what's funny is the top part, they'll lean into and say, see, he means only crimes. But then if I point to the bottom and say, but see, he said right there, well, that's not what the bill says. Both ways. But ultimately, the reality is clear. Student visa or not, sympathizers, or if you join a protest that's not pro-jihadist, it's Palestinian self-determination, which, just to be clear, I'm sure there's some protest you could find out there that, I mean, what does it even look like, pro-jihadist? I've never seen one. I'm sure they exist somewhere, just being objective, but pretty sure I've never seen one where they're like, yay, let's go commit terrorism. That just seems so stupid. These people are jokes. My point is, sure, something like that exists somewhere, probably the Fed or probably the Mossad, but the point is overall, We know for a fact there were people that were going, we want peace, and it was being led by, let's say, Jews for Peace, for example, right? Or the other Jewish organizations that were fighting for these protests that were being framed as racist. They called them pro-jihadist. So right there is an example of one that's not, provably, that was pro-Palestinian freedom, that they called pro-jihadist, and all they're saying is if you simply were there, you get deported. So just to be clear, if you simply show up at a protest where you're fighting for them to be free, you're going to get deported by Trump. In this case, which is true, and you know that. It's very clear what they're doing. Every which way you look at this, it is a violation of your, whether a visa or not. And it says, and the United States must ensure that admitted aliens and aliens otherwise already present in the United States do not bear hostile attitudes towards its citizens, culture, government, institutions, or founding principles, and do not advocate for, aid, or support designated foreign terrorists and other threats to our national security. There's so many ways to take that. Hostile attitudes. So, that's not how this works. You don't get to decide what people can feel. It's not how it works. You could argue that there's a law being broken, but to simply say that we're going to deport you because you don't like us, guys, that's ideological. You are an ideological tyrant. You're telling people they can't think and feel what they want. Isn't that what we're all trying to get at? We're watching our government build a situation where they're trying to dictate how you could think and feel. Just because they're pointing at people you pretend they're here on a visa. Like, it's so easy to other these people and make it about how they're just the bad guy until it becomes your problem. Until suddenly you're saying the thing they don't want you to say. So obvious. It's like, I feel like do I really have to go through this again? We've gone for years. We know this is coming. It says, U.S. National Security Advisor Mike Waltz detailed the administration's medium-term broader effort at combating anti-Semitism during the transition, forecasting a cross-governmental effort to combat radicalization, where the U.S. government will, quote, look at mosques, individuals, universities, professors, you name it, he says, that pose a threat to the United States and are radicalizing individuals to harm the United States. Who post a threat? I wonder if he said pose a threat. So I don't know how often you see mosques and universities posting, you know what I mean? Like, to me, this is them simply saying we're profiling. And I think you damn well know that's what's happening, whether Biden or Trump, for a foreign government. Individuals, professors, mosques, you name it. He says Trump's new order further calls upon every federal executive department and agency leader to review and report every single department, guys, within 60 days, quote, on all criminal and civil authorities and actions available for fighting anti-Semitism. Does it sound like we're going to go after the individual? This is an entire implementation for every single group to basically put a report forward in 60 days on what they can do with every resource they have to fight anti-Semitism, to fight an idea that you're allowed to feel and think. This should be very alarming to anybody who actually sees what's happening, or really anybody that's not being dishonest with themselves. This is exactly what it seems like. Make it anti-Semitism, make it about something else. They're picking something that an idea, a thought, and saying, not this one, not allowed. That's a problem. And you damn well know it. It further stipulates immediate action from the Department of Justice, quote, to protect law and order, quell pro-Hamas vandalism and intimidation, and investigate and punish anti-Jewish racism in leftist anti-American colleges. Oh, totally not by ideology or, partisan driven. Those leftist anti-American groups. Are you serious? Like, think about how gross this is. Like, if you want to recognize, like, they're trying to pretend like it's only these leftist colleges. The vast majority of the people that were protesting were there to promote Palestinian freedom. What's hilarious to me is you got this major thread through their group that has a very obvious racist tendency, who Israel called out moments ago. Red hats, you anti-Semites. And here you are turning around and pointing at who they tell you to. Are you really that easy to manipulate? Trump's new executive order describes the action as Trump going on the offensive to enforce law and order to protect civil rights. That's what they point to. He just said the words. That's what he's doing. No, it's not. Just because he says things out loud, don't make them the truth. What he's doing is the opposite of that. He's going in the offensive to enforce what Israel wants against law and order, against your rights. And it says immediately after the jihadist terrorist attacks against people of Israel on October 7th. Oh, so now you're instituting legal action in this country for a foreign government's, for what happened for, an attack on a foreign government? Like, think about that. That's like any other country instituting some kind of a law because of September 11th. It seems interesting. And it says pro-Hamas aliens and left-wing radicals begin a campaign of intimidation, vandalism. They're making this completely about the left. Doesn't that seem alarming to anybody? It says celebrating Hamas. And here's what gets interesting. Celebrating Hamas's mass rape, which never happened, kidnapping, and murder. It continues. They physically blocked Jewish Americans from attending college classes. Do you know how many times they've lied about that? Where they've intentionally tried to go through their group when the faster route was around them. It's lazy. But people like this are going along with it because they're either bought off, paid for, influenced, or lying for their own agenda. It says obstructed synagogues and assaulted worshipers. I mean, you don't know how many, like in my experience, of course, you could argue that I'm lying or missing something. I've looked into this from the beginning, and it's objectively clear that the vast majority of all those things were happening from Zionist manipulators against anybody, including other Jews who are protesting there, many of which spoke up, including Holocaust survivors that were there and said, these people are the problem. But he must be a racist, right? That makes sense. It says the White House further linked its plans to combat domestic anti-Semitism with Trump's vows to move the U.S. embassy in Israel to Jerusalem and brokering Abraham Accords. Great. So he's literally telling you, I am fighting to suppress your speech for Israel's objectives, most of which are illegal, including the Israel embassy in Jerusalem. They do not have the power to do this, guys. The bottom line is all of this is suppressing your rights for a foreign government. It could not be more clear. This, on its face, we told you was coming, and many of you pretended it was never going to happen. Now here, we have to wait for him to actually sign this. And when he does, unfortunately, it'll be one more step in this direction, which has been building for a very long time. Tim Lordon simply points out that Donald Trump, he claims is an anti-Semite. Why? And that he should be deported. Why? Because he funds the killing of Semites in Palestine. Now he's making the point about how what they pretend a Semite is not even remotely what it is. A Semite is a member of any of the peoples who speak or spoke a Semitic language, including in particular the Jews and Arabs. Now, what's funny about that is that the Jews ultimately, again, we're talking about a religion here, guys. We're not talking about an ethnicity. The bottom line, though, is that Palestinians are Semites. But what's ridiculous today is now they pretend that all of these people, most of which aren't from the actual location in Israel, like, the Polish leader Netanyahu, are not actually Semites. In this case, we're actually dealing with Semites, and they're the ones being killed. And so what he's saying is, okay, if we're going to talk about anti-Semitism, well, Donald Trump is literally killing Semites or paying for that to happen, just like Biden did. Here's this clip on all these are doctors, by the way, and I have more I need to add, I just haven't gotten to it. All these clips are doctors all telling you the same thing. Israel's killing children. Israel's killing doctors. Israel is committing genocide. Every single one of them. He says they will never be able to bury Israel's corruption. Listen to these 40 doctors. Now, on top of that, guys, there's just other clips that are important to include in all this, which are the biometric wall he's talking about, him continuing to support the shot right up until today, telling you it's saving lives, even though it's not. We all know that as he rolls out the mRNA cancer shots. Here he is saying we have to shut the internet down in 2016, work with Bill Gates because, ISIS was the point at the time. And what he said, people will scream free speech. Those are stupid people, is what he says. Or take firearms, due process later, he says in that clip. And this clip was the recent one, 2024, saying the same thing he did up there, that stupid people will say it's unconstitutional when you burn the flag and get put in jail. No, it's been roundly argued, proven, rather just roundly ruled by Supreme Court that it is not against it is a constitutional right. Now, you can disagree. I also think it's insulting, I guess, distasteful for any flag. The point is people have, very clearly people in any country fight for these things, and it's distasteful, do so as an insult, but it is a right. And he says it doesn't matter because that's not what he wants. That is authoritarianism, guys. That is imperialism. That's what he's doing. And here we are, screaming for it because that's what you've been told. Well, here is Noam, who we've played before, telling you the same thing. She came out early. This is Noam's state of South Dakota. And he says it has a Jewish population of 0.08%. And now she's Trump's head of Homeland Security, intent on making her South Dakota censorship national. And she rolls out the same dynamic. But, and this is before. Oh, I didn't know you guys could see me the whole time. Forgot that was up. Here we go. So this is Noam saying the same kind of dynamic of the anti-Semitism laws. And so this is a place where there's 0.08%. I mean, this has to matter for the bigger conversation.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Governor Cristian, and I'm so thrilled to see all of you here this morning. Thank you for being here to honor such a special occasion where we sign a bill that will define anti-Semitism and how we can continue to make sure that we're standing against acts of hatred and standing in solidarity with our Israeli community and the Jewish people. We are going to have a few speakers to share with us.
Now she goes on to introduce the rabbi and so on. The point is simply about the fact that she's rolling this out. And this is before it even got, it's obvious why these people are being chosen. All we're talking about, the guy is passing a legislation that argues that you're not allowed to say certain things or think certain things. It's very simple. Like, so if you're going to pretend like we should have a law that says you're not allowed to say certain anti-Semitic things, why wouldn't there be a law that says you're not allowed to say Islamophobic things or any other racist statements? Why is one unique versus the other? Like, no matter how you try to make that argument, no matter how much you think it makes sense, it's racist. You're literally arguing that one thing is more important than the other. It's simple. And you probably very much think that. And you almost probably think that it's bad or insulting for me to say that's not the case. It simply continues to show the supremacy around this conversation. And I do not believe that's unique to Jewish people. I think it's unique to Zionism, who are manipulating both Jewish and Christian people. But it is obvious that it is part of the conversation. And I'll even show you this before I show you this article here. For those that are already very aware that Israel is an apartheid state as ruled by Human Rights Watch, Amnesty International, and B'Tselem, the leading human rights groups in the world. This is the leading human rights group in Israel, B'Tselem, the Israeli Information Center on Human Rights. And it says, from 2021, a regime of Jewish supremacy from the Jordan River to the Mediterranean Sea. This is apartheid. It's important to recognize that's not a racist statement, guys. This is found by every human rights group in the world, essentially. So this is from 2024, about January last year. Anti-Defamation League staff decry dishonest campaign against Israel critics. That's people within the ADL. The point is they were actively going after people just because they didn't like their views. You already know this, though, right? Because we've played many different clips from ADL, like the leaked clip from Greenblatt, but also the ones from the documentary from James Lee. Here's just the one of Greenblatt.
I also want to point out that we have a major generational problem. All the polling I've seen, ADL's polling, ICC's polling, independent polling, suggests this is not a left-right gap, folks. The issue in the United States in support for Israel is not left and right. It is young and old. And so we really have a TikTok problem, a Gen Z problem, that our community needs to put the same brains that gave us Taglit, the same brains that gave us all these other amazing innovations, need to put our energy toward this, like, fast. Because again, like, we've been chasing this left-right divide. It's the wrong game. The real game is the next generation. We saw a dramatic change in the language of the activists here in America on October the 8th. The language of groups that we've long tracked, who've long been problematic, like Students for Justice in Palestine and Jewish Voices for Peace. The language I could show you from their toolkits, because our analysts are in their groups. We saw this again on October the 8th. It was that fast. Like, the language in their toolkits was all about the Zionist entity.
Right. I mean, there's a lot of important things in there, right? We played that before. He's literally telling you that it's not, they want you to think it's a partisan thing. It's not. They're very clear. And that's why TikTok was manipulated. And clearly, I think we all see where it's going. Musk or some other element is going to work. It's going to wrap it into the U.S. intelligence apparatus, Oracle, something like that. It's just going to be one more part of this very same thing we're telling you is coming, which seems to have been the plan. It's very hard to miss. But he's telling you that it's not just the, one side or the other. It's a growing awareness from the younger groups. But he also makes it very clear, in case you missed the most important part, that I'll play the clip from James Lee right now, that the ADL is a spy organization. It's very clear. They have spies in American Jewish groups. Think about how wild that is. An Israeli group has spies inside Jewish organizations because that is fighting for Jewish people? No, it's Zionism that's afraid of Jewish people that see what they are.
ADL is an Israeli spy organization masking around as a supposed civil rights group and doing real harm to the Jewish community writ large in order to run cover for the state of Israel. They also have the power to monitor social media activity across all major platforms and change social media algorithms the way they see fit. Don't believe me? Well, here's Jonathan Greenblatt, the CEO of the ADL.
We work with YouTube to get them to change their algorithms. We work with Facebook on trying to use a redirect method, so when you search for Holocaust, you get directed to like a Yad Vashem page.
We opened a center in Silicon Valley back in 2017. And the woman who runs it, she's an ex-Facebook executive. I have software engineers and data scientists working at ADL. We're monitoring all this stuff, and we're working with all the platforms, by the way, Google and YouTube and Meta and Twitter and Reddit and Steam and Amazon, all these companies.
Right to this day, by the way, Yaccarino and Musk are still working with the ADL on the record. Why isn't that alarming to the very people screaming up free speech? I don't know. Now, going back to the point from before, as again, to reiterate, as True Stream Media points out, June Slater saying, what if they're deliberately letting all this happen in order to justify more surveillance? Not just one side, guys. All of it, your government, through Biden to Trump, and now more so than ever, allowing the very thing. And again, if you have to really, whether you agree with it or not, just take a step back and at least consider the possibility that Biden was meant to allow the immigration situation to fester, to become a problem, so it could then have to be dealt with. Think about it. And now here we are, as they're rolling out the exact same thing they pretended they were fighting. As True Stream Media says, that's how the biometric entry exit wall will get a public seal of approval. After years of unimpeded illegal immigration and border agents pretending they suddenly forgot their jobs, cutting fences and fist bumping people on the way in. So, bringing this into the part that I think is most important, the engineering of it all. Now, we've talked about weaponized migration and experimentation. This is titled Tools for Subversion, Division, and Manufacturing Consent. We also talked about one of the provable examples, I think is very important in all this, that back on January of last year, there was what was claimed to be a Palestinian man from Hamas who was coming through the southern border, and he was cryptically saying, "You will know my name." And the right went all crazy about it until it very quickly was shown that he actually worked for Mossad, was recruiting for Mossad, and I think it was in Jordan. I forget it's been a while since we talked about this. I did the same thing last time. The bottom line is all these source materials in here. It's very clear. It was very quickly shown that it was the image they were showing was the person was older. It's clear he wasn't him. We found out it was actually a person who was provably on the record recruiting for Mossad and caught for it and held accountable for it. And then suddenly the story went away. So what was that? Well, it seems pretty clear to me. It was a person that seems to have been working on behalf of Israel to tell you Palestinians and Hamas were coming to the southern border. Why? Because that's what they wanted you to think. And they were even Trump said that. And now they're telling you Al-Qaeda's hotbeds are inside this country. Well, who do they work for? Israel and the United States. It is in his proxy element for both of them. We've proven this. So my point is, keeping this in mind, I think it's quite obvious what's going on. So PVT points out something very interesting. Accounts are getting direct messages in which they're being asked to post staged fake Muslim terror attacks for money. Now, what's frustrating is this account had this posted. I went over this the other day and I was looking at it, had all these different screenshots, had all this different information. Now the post is gone. So what's frustrating is that and we just talked about this, right? Who was it? I can't forget who it is now. They basically were telling you, look, I keep posting these things and then my account goes down. Oh, it was, I think it was Moran, for one of the guys, pro-Palestinian accounts, the larger one. I forget what the name, I think it was Saeed something. I forget which one it was. But simply saying, look, every time I post these things, my account gets taken away. They say I have to delete the post and I can't get my account back till the next day. So that's happening right now. And nobody sees it. And how do you prove it? The point is that they're making you delete it. And then, so who knows if that's what happened here? But either way, I think it's interesting to think about. And I know for a fact this is happening in a general sense, that people are being paid or influenced to carry out false information like, Visegrad and Elon Musk, provably, whether Venezuela, whether in Europe, all over this conversation, constantly being, and Elon Musk has been called out for. Even Twitter has fact-checked him, and he's still constantly, seemingly by design, shares from that account whenever seems to be told to. But this case, as I want you to think about whether this is an agenda based on the obvious. Not that it's not possible that there is extremists in every dynamic, but that simply there's an agenda, that somebody benefits from convincing people in this country that there's a Muslim extremist problem. When we stand back, we can see where all of this really does stem from, right? Whether we're talking about Al-Qaeda or ISIS or anything else, that we can see that ultimately most of this does come from one clear location.
The Zionists have used it and brought it, in fact, to the area. Terrorism, as we know it today, the planting of bombs in marketplaces and so on and so forth, was, in fact, introduced into the Middle East by the Zionists in the 1920s. But the net result of Zionist terrorism and violence in the first third of the 20th century has brought forth, to my mind, the anomaly, the horrific and unacceptable status in the Middle East today of the State of Israel, which is, in fact, an armed garrison state, which now exports more arms and distributes violence all around the world, vastly disproportionate to its size. I mean, in that respect, I think it's a horrible cycle of violence. But in it all, I think the Palestinian is the victim. There's no question about that.
Here's Avi Shalem talking about the manipulation of Iraqi Jews.
Iraqi Jews were convinced that Israel had a hand in uprooting them. After the 1948 war, there was mounting popular hostility towards the Jews in Iraq. 5 bombs exploded in Jewish sites. The series of bombs created a panic which led more and more Jews to register to leave the country. I met an elderly friend of my mother's, an Iraqi Jew called Yaakov Karkukli, who had been in the Zionist underground. One member of his group, Yosef Basri, a very, very intelligent Jewish lawyer, and his assistant, Shalom Saleh Shalom, were responsible for 3 out of the 5 bombs. Basri's controller was an Israeli intelligence officer named Max Binet, who was based in Tehran.
Now, it looks Elon Levy apparently is sharing something today. I'll probably do it in one of the next shows about that very story. Like trying to pretend like my relative. Well, you're lying, man. It's everything of the Zionist history seems to be fabrication. But this is where it gets in the super contentious stuff that I think is important to cover because of how real and obvious and provable this is. And this goes into the fake extremist elements, but also the undeniable overlap, collaboration between Zionism and Nazism. It's important to not shy away from how very easy this is to see. Now, this Vivid account is one of these. Apparently, I'm not sure. You can look at it for yourself. Like, apparently, people did this whole breakdown where this is some guy in India who's just being paid to lie for Israel and Zionism, which is pretty much what we're come accustomed to. But who knows? The point is, he's a Zionist account that's constantly lying about what's going on. And he says, the Nazis were completely annihilated in World War II because the world fully realized they were an enemy of civilization and a threat to the entire world. Why can't the world realize the same about Hamas? It's like, well, that's not true. First of all, they did not get annihilated. They literally became the foundation for NASA, Operation Paperclip. And obviously, like, it's just, these people are just inherent liars. One thing we'll go over in the next show is how I think it's actually this same account is literally sharing a cutout from a Hitler speech, but framing it with Palestinians. Like, there's a quote that's basically a paraphrasing of something Hitler was saying about how, it's the same idea. They keep saying how nobody wants to take the Palestinians. None of the Arab countries want to take them, which shows you what they really are. That's basically exactly the kind of narrative Hitler was putting out about the Jews at the time, which just shows you how it's like they want you to see the kind of mentality they had. You're emulating exactly what you pretend that you're fighting. It's crazy to me. Either way, the point is that's not true. In general, in any context, really. And he said, why can't the world realize this about Hamas? Well, first of all, Israel funds Hamas and has funded Hamas all the way up until October 7th, right? That's important. And we haven't played that in a while. We might as well play just a part of it real quickly. Because the truth is, it's important for people to remember that. If you don't, and that's in no way meant to invalidate the legal act of armed resistance. That's also important because that's the case. No matter what the reality on the grid point is, Palestinians or anybody there fighting alongside had the right to legal armed resistance according to the Fort Geneva Convention, international law. That does not change. Whether Israel funded some of them or not. I think that since 2006, a lot has changed. I think Israel was still, in showing how inept it is today, was still trying to influence certain outcomes. Maybe to this point, maybe some of them involved October 7th. Who knows? Clearly, there's a lot of anomalies. But nonetheless, it's important to recognize that they funded Hamas to make sure they kept them divided. So if you're going to talk about any of this, including October 7th, Israel is responsible.
So are you saying Benjamin Netanyahu deliberately boosted Hamas to try to prevent a Palestinian state?
Yeah, sure. He deliberately and systematically even told, is on record, whoever wants to avoid the threat of a two-state solution has to support my policy of paying protection money to the Hamas.
So what we did, with the permission of our Prime Minister, is to let Qatar to transfer a huge amount of money in cash, probably more than $1.4 billion. By doing it, we increased the power of Hamas. We did everything in order to make sure that Hamas will go on controlling Gaza, and Palestinian Authority will control the West Bank, so they will fight each other.
And that is on the record. Here's the tweet from Haaretz from October 9th, 2023. Anyone who wants to thwart the establishment of a Palestinian state has to support bolstering Hamas. This is our strategy, part of our strategy. You guys all know this, but it's funny how, we talk about this and we get new viewers. It's some of these things are big deal. They've never seen that before. And well, how is that possible? It's crazy. So the point is that, first of all, obviously, they funded it. So how does it not realize about Hamas? Well, the game is that you're actually fighting the Palestinians as a people. But I simply argue, or posted, I'll just leave this here, which is the show I did entitled Nazi Zionism versus Nazism. Israel's connection to extremist ideology and ADL's history of faking Nazi marches. We're going to focus on the first and the last today. There's the actual show. Very contentious, obviously because of all the propaganda. The reality is it's one of the easiest things to prove in this conversation. So first, just a clip here that I'll show just a part of it. Or, I think this is the short one. I'll play this one. This is a reality that I'll prove to you with the actual news articles. The fact is the ADL was caught faking Nazi marches. It's actually it's a pretty public conversation. And I'll go through the actual documentation from even the Jewish Telegraph Agency. This one is the, what was this one? I'll show you in a second. And here's even a Haaretz article talking about how they tried to recruit, or how they did ultimately recruit anybody, whether it was the Soviet Union or in this case, the Nazi Germany, as long as they got what they wanted. It's important. You can't decouple that from where we are today. So here's this clip first.
Many of you may remember in February 1979, there was a big uproar because someone by the name of James Gutman applied for a permit to lead a march of Nazis through downtown Philadelphia. Now, eventually, some enterprising reporters did an investigation. You know what they turned up? James Gutman was none other than Mordecai Levy, who worked with the Anti-Defamation League and later split off that to form the terrorist Jewish Defense League. This was an operation that was run by the ADL. They wanted to have a Nazi march in Philadelphia. Why? Because how can they raise money to justify their existence if American Jews don't think there's a lot of anti-Semitism? So what better thing to do than to slap swastikas on a couple of people, lead them on a march through town, and then the next day the ADL comes marching in and says, look, there are Nazis on the streets, you need to give us money so we can protect you. And then, on top of that, have a tax-exempt status. This was not a one-time operation.
And here is one of the many of this. ADL provocateurs at work, inciting Nazi rallies. Where there's right there, Mordecai Levy, a paid operative of ADL, fact-finding division. Now, it goes in to talk about, there's multiple examples of this. Philadelphia, there's one Chicago, There's one, or there's another one too. Hold on. Well, basically, and it talks about Gutmann, right? It's a name he mentioned as well. This is from the Jewish Telegraph Agency. Nazi March turns out to be a hoax. James Gutmann. You know, we've gone over this in depth. Watch the show I just highlighted. Nazism versus Zionism. It's very clear. Here is Israel funding the Azov movement, which overlaps with the conversation as well. This is from 2018. Literally saying, rights groups demand Israel stop arming neo-Nazis. That's the Azov movement right there. And the reason that's important, guys, is because it shows you the extension of this that goes well beyond even just ADL kind of faking Nazi elements to get support, but literally funding Nazi groups, like literal actual groups that are carrying out Nazi actions against individuals, or let's just say, you know, fascist or neo-Nazi, because they're not literal parts of the Nazi party, right? Because that's words have meaning. But nonetheless, this is very clearly what they all support. And this is the same thing. Whether they're supporting the most radical elements of the Islamic culture, they pretend like they're stoking the things they want to use to rationalize what they are, whether that's in Christianity, Judaism, or Islam. That's what Zionism is doing. As David Icke and I talked about in regard to Sabbateanism. See if I can get that to come up. How do you spell that again? Well, this is the research. Hold on. Why wouldn't that pop up? Let's see if it comes up here. Oh, that's frustrating. Oh, well, let me try to search that as we're going through this. Let's see. The reason I think might be important, what David Icke talks about in this conversation, here we go, let me try it just like that, is that ultimately Sabbateanism as a you know, kind of a foundational element, people argue. There we go. Oh, I guess I didn't put it in the title. That's why. I thought I did. That's weird. Here, I'll include Adam's interview on this as well. I had a good interview with that. So this was David Icke interview, Zionism, infiltration of Judaism, weaponized migration, and mainstream alt media. And this is where we get into this very point. It's a very interesting conversation because he argues it's a cornerstone, like a foundational part of Zionism, Nazism, and communism. And then this one is an interview with Adam Green, which I thought was also very interesting. Religious prophecies in Israel, Zionism versus Judaism, and Abrahamic religions. I'll share that one too. Include those for you. Now, going forward, the point is, remember, funding the Azov movement or any number of radical elements. This has been going on for a long time. As I wrote here, 2022, not just Azov, documents prove the CIA has been cultivating fascism in Ukraine since at least 1948. Now that dovetails very clearly with the Zionist entity as they grow into more influential entity. This one is this just shows you the overlapping of this Israel, US, CIA type agenda that becomes real for you. Buffalo shooter linked to the Azov movement. And I wrote, as the clumsy vanilla ISIS agenda stumbles forward. They really were trying to make this the case, but realize, guys, the overlap to what we're seeing in the Azov movement, to the groups they're funding elsewhere, the Syrian extremists, and this is the same thing, guys. How do you explain this other than recognizing that Israel is trickling out these little events in this country to justify these actions, and U.S. is using them? I mean, you could look at it, the U.S. doing them do the same way, but I think it's very clear who benefits the most from this at the expense of everybody else. This one was 2023. CIA is creating, fostering, and seeding neo-Nazi extremists into the U.S. This was the Blood Tribe. It's like some Patriot Front spinoff. When this even had that guy, Handsome Truth, there that pretended his whole entire career not to be racist, and he's in there zig heiling with his Nazi symbols. It's like these people are FBI agents as far as I'm concerned, or some other intelligence apparatus. If you've watched as long as we have and watched these groups, they were the ones who used to jump in your chats and tell you to name the Jew. Like, these guys were literally trying to pretend like they weren't this. They were trying to trap you into this. It's the same ones today trying to drive you into thinking it's all about Jewish people through the truth that we can see that stops short of recognizing it's Zionism abusing that because they want you to fall for that trap. That's how we're going to get into it right now. Here's now this, by the way, this also overlaps. I'll include this show. Who is behind the Moscow Crocus City Hall attack? That talks about ISIS-K. Just another example of what I think is another prop-up, cut-out, fake entity that they're building, and they're using these things, which I think is going to come to play. where their whole Al-Qaeda in the U.S. game they're playing with the CIA right now. But this is where I think it'll play. This is from January 13th. U.S. blacklists white supremacist terrorgram as a terrorist group. Terrorgram. It's not a joke, by the way. United States on Monday designated as a terrorist group Terrorgram, a white supremacist network accused of orchestrating attacks around the world. The move by, to me, who knows? It could be organic, but to me, it sounds exactly like the dumb, kind of half short-sighted, assumptive, reactive propaganda we've gotten accustomed to from Israel. Terrorgram, like that's what they think. That's how they think you think. They're the dumb, juvenile, childish, unexperienced. They're the ones projecting that's how I read it anyway. Like it's like a bunch of white men in an advertising room, 80, old white men in suits deciding they know what's hip for a bunch of young kids. That's what I think that's the equivalent of Israel sending out their dumb propaganda in the world, where we're going, terrorgram? Really? I think it's stupid, but I could be definitely wrong. Same as watching these Patriot Front idiots walk around with their ridiculous things like we can't clearly tell that it's some organized effort. But that's, again, my opinion. But the move by the outgoing administration of Joe Biden, who has vowed to fight racism, puts the transnational group in the same group as blacklisted terrorist groups that are predominantly, but not exclusively, Islamist. So for one of the first examples of these groups being added alongside the Islamist entities. The State Department has also designated as terrorists three alleged leaders of Terrorgram. Ciro, Daniel, whatever. I'm sure the names will become eventually important. The United States remains deeply concerned about the racially, ethnically motivated violence extremists. Except Israel, though. Got it. Okay. Other than the ongoing genocide, where they're doing everything for racially, ethnically motivated actions, starving an entire population. That one's okay, though. We're only worried about the fake version. Understood. So here's what it says in Wikipedia. Terrorgram, I just can't laugh. This is a stupid name, is a key communications forum for individuals and networks attached to, guess what? The Atomwaffen Division, the base, and other explicit militant accelerationist groups. Or you mean others that we have in our little catalog of fake entities that we've grown through our FBI Mossad organization. That's how I think about it anyway. Well, guys, if you haven't known this already, and I will probably go deeper into this at some point when we go further on this group, but we've gone so far on this in regard to the base, in regard to the Atomwaffen Division, in regard to the, what was the other one? All the Azov movement elements. These things are directly tied back to what we've talked about. I've made this network undeniably clear. The same thing that people like Laura Loomer tried to co-opt and pretend it didn't involve Israel because they're desperately co-opted by Israel. The point is very clear that these groups are all interconnected to the very same thing. That remember, like the point about like the Rise Above movement. Oh, hold on. Let me see if this pops up. There you go. Look at that. This is an easy one-stop shop. It's not the full picture, but this is from when I was still censored on the other account. It's After Hours Live. Verifiable facts. U.S. Congress made sure the Azov Battalion would get arms in 2016. They still do. They just pretend that they don't, but it's still illegal to this day. CIA's trained them since 2015, and now we know well back to the 40s. FBI verified that the Azov movement is neo-Nazi and is immersed with the Ukraine's government. They lied about that to this day. And that those in Charlottesville, that's the important part, are their U.S. faction. So this is in a Newsweek article, but we've talked about this in many different ways. The Rise Above movement is the American arm of the Azov movement. So if you're following along in the evidence, which I proved 15 times over, is the Azov movement is funded by Israel, is funded by the U.S. government, then that means that the Rise Above movement that marched through Charlottesville, that way they will not replace us, all that, which started the whole thing, was a U.S. operation, was a Mossad operation. That's what this is. And the same with Germany. They've got the neo-Nazi Third Path. Italy's got Casa Pound. These are all extensions of the same game. In the Rise Above movement with the marching through the streets and the hitting protesters with the cars, that's where it all really kicked off. And that was from the same group. It's all very clear. We're being manipulated. Now we're seeing more. Pointing to the Atomwaffen Division, the base. These are all different manipulations. The base, guys, if you remember how embarrassing this is. The base is literally the English translation of Al-Qaeda. Al-Qaeda translates to the base. So this guy, who was a former State Department guy, is literally for the government. I knew I'll just bring it up real quick. I wasn't going to go into it. It's right here. It'll pop up. The base. Now, they did change this, by the way. That's why I didn't want to get into it, because I have to go back and get the archive, because I guarantee they're changing it for obvious reasons. But even still, if you just look it up and look at this, it very clearly goes into, what's his name? Hold on. I'll find it real quick. It goes into his background. His name is something with an N. Yeah, right here. The base. Oh, right there. His name is Nazaro. Made a little search for that, and I'll show you what I'm talking about, where he used to work for the U.S. government, which is just ridiculous to me. Right there. See the Atomwaffen division. So it says that he, where is it? They changed all this too. I just looked at it a second ago. It's in here. Just I gotta find it real quick. So it's saying, come on, damn it. Actually, I do this, then now I have to find it because I've waited this long. Saying, where is it? It's so frustrating. Is it really all the way to the top after I just looked at this? That's really frustrating. I'm going to find it now since I made you guys wait this whole time. So the bottom line is he used to work for the State Department. He went, that's what we'll find it. Hold on. There it is. Afghanistan. So it's saying he previously, see, this is what they changed it to. You could prove all this stuff. It's very clear. He claimed to be a veteran of the wars in Afghanistan. He is. He was there. The government has actually spoken up about it. He's since denied putting on a uniform, but you can prove it. You prove it is. That's what's so funny. Nazaro later claimed he'd been an intelligence, security, and military contractor after posted letters online from the Department of Homeland Security and DHS and the Pentagon thanking him for his service. In February 2021, DHS confirmed his employment, but would not authenticate the letter. The point is, guys, this guy used to work for the State Department. He worked for the Homeland Security. He worked overseas for terrorism and counter operations, and then one day just went like, I'm going to move to Russia and start a terrorist group. Certainly possible, but it's embarrassing. The point is, you can clearly see how this is meant to work. And this was before the agenda, which was meant to drive you into thinking that Russia was seeding Nazism into Ukraine, which was then overflowing into the United States. And this is how it was all going to work. And it blew up in their face. That's my opinion, but I think I've laid this out very clearly. And then since then, now I think what we saw continuing was just the justification to get what they wanted from Syria. But either way, they've been trying to seed these into other countries. You can prove it. The Rise Above movement is connected to this, is connected to the Azov movement. They're the ones populating this stuff. That should be easy to see by now. And so now pointing back to Telegram, they're going, here's a new one building up, and it's connected and extended from the very same groups that they're still manipulating. Here's an article from 2022. U.S. government and corporate media to desperately attempt to rewrite history and hide the truth about Ukraine. Look at this guy. Yeah, and he's just telling you right from my heart. That's what he's saying. Right from my heart, guys. Straight to the neo-Nazis. Right from my heart. And here's one. Al-Qaeda, Ukraine, and the new Al-Qaeda. Whitney wrote this for TLAV in 2022, highlighting she talks about the Atomwaffen division. The point is where we are from the new Al-Qaeda, right? They're extending this agendas, and it's shifted a lot since then. But in regard to the fake actions, before we get into the actual Zionism Nazi overlap, Mensch Osint shared this, and it's just amazing how continuously this happens. Do not take this for the fact that there are no events. There's people acting against Jewish people all over the world. There's people acting against black people, acting against white people. There's racism, guys. People act out in disgusting ways all over the world, a lot of which is usually funded and driven through people like we're talking about today. The point is, there are also a lot, and more than anything I've ever seen, of people, in this case, Zionists, faking these things to get you to think they're happening. Now, in what other context does that happen? How often, if there's that much of this, why would they need to fake it all the time? That's the point. It's pretty clear this is a false agenda that's being driven. Not that it doesn't exist, but that they're manufacturing this, like pretending there's a 400% spike in anti-Semitism that you can prove is largely Palestinian support. That's a lie, right? Here he is. He goes, well. Victim of the anti-Semitic tags in his building in Paris would have invented everything. That's a translation. It's actually a woman. The point is, you can see the video right here. This went viral. Acting so serious on TV. Look, all these painted swastikas and crosses. Oh, look at, oh my God, it's all over the. She lied about this. She's been caught. Now, why would somebody do that? Because of attention? Maybe you're lonely. Maybe you're being paid. Well, don't forget. We just talked about this in the context of the Muslim attacks, which is all this ties together. You realize this is one conversation. But why? And you can watch this. It's a public story right now. It's pretty the craziness of how public it gets, and yet nobody really talks about it. Like the soccer game, right? Like the flag stabbing of the eye. Like these are like in spectacular fashion blowing up in their face, and yet the media that would, I mean, remember the Jesse Smollett coverage? Like the ability they have to go after a story well after they know it's fake, or alternatively a story that they ignore even they know it's real. Like it's just incredible. It's just dishonesty. Where do you think that comes from? It's a combination of influence from their government and foreign manipulation. Here, Wyatt Reed says, and this is the same story, RT covered it. Her name is Nancy. Now she faces $30,000 in fines and possible prison time for making it all up. But Wyatt Reed says, crazy how this keeps happening. It's almost like there's some kind of powerful geopolitical force incentivizing this behavior. UK pro-Israel lawyer fake graffiti, attack to frame pro-Palestinian group. What do you know? An alleged hate crime at a Jewish cafe was the most brazen a community's ever seen. It was all fake, police now say. Jewish man arrested after spray painting swastikas on his own home. It really is unprecedented. Look into this for yourself. It's unreal how many times it's happened and then been publicly covered, and still you're not allowed to even consider it. He told police he was stabbed for being Jewish. Then his Apple Watch caught him in a lie. I mean, think about that, how disgusting that is. Not only that you're lying about a hate crime, but you're trying to get people punished for a crime they never committed because you're a racist. That's wild. And of course, even people knowing they're lying would sort of rationalize it about, they're just so gross, I have to lie. No, that's your problem. That is you. You're a bad person. Max Blumenthal points out, Australian police are investigating whether overseas actors, this is what Wyatt Reed was pointing to, or individuals are paying local criminals to carry out anti-Semitic crimes in the country. No. Sort of like people being paid on Twitter to do that same thing. You can't, it's like, I mean, look at the whole Elon Musk infrastructure through all this after getting caught for censoring H1B, lurches into the whole racist Muslim, terror gang and in Europe and whatever else, all of which there's some level of importance to. Not, and you didn't even say it like that. All of those stories, which are important in their own right. And the point is, he is clearly using them and lying about them in most cases, which is even more disgusting, since there is truth to these stories, and he's the one making it less visible by lying about stuff. That's the point they make all the time about this. But it goes on to say, Prime Minister Albanese says anti-Semitic attacks are, quote, being perpetrated by people who don't have a particular issue, aren't motivated by an ideology, but are paid actors. He added, which, by the way, makes it that much harder to actually figure out because there's no motive. They're being paid and they're doing it. And it says, he added, it's unclear who or where the payments are coming from. I think we all know. Australia's shadow. Now, to be clear, do not blindly assume. My point is, from an opinion standpoint, I think it's quite obvious what's driving this, but we would never say we know for sure until we can prove that. We all are allowed to have opinions. It says, Australia's shadow Home Office minister wonders if a foreign government is engaging in state-sponsored terror. Isn't that interesting? Well, yes, that's exactly what it'd be, but only called out if it was somebody from a certain part of the world. Would it be anti-Semitic to investigate a certain settler colonial country, he asks, whose existence is justified by global proliferation of anti-Semitism? Exactly. He says, remember when thousands of bomb threats to the U.S. Jewish community centers in 2017 were blamed on Trump's rise, and the perp turned out to be a Jewish Israeli teenager living in Israel? Remember that? You probably don't want to talk about it today, but it's real. He goes, that Israeli teen, Michael Kadar, also used robocalls to issue 590 plus bomb threats to schools in Australia. Despite being a dual U.S. citizen, Israel refused the FBI's request to extradite him. I wonder why. You know why. Here's an interesting point. Smile to Jahana is the one that I saw this first from. He says, Tommy Robinson posts a gotcha photo of a fully veiled Muslim woman. Well, first, before we get into it, let's look. Look at this. How horrifying, right? All the scary images of the evil Muslims of Middle East, right? He says, admin post. I'm not sure what that means. I've seen him do that. Does that mean he's not doing it? I don't care, frankly. He says, this has no place in the 21st century. Women in Islam with choice is what this person says. Right. Clearly, they're just good people trying to expose the dangerous Islam, right? Well, guess what? That's not what it is. He says, hold on. But it backfires. Turns out it's actually a Jewish woman in Israel. Who saw that coming? The man funded by Zionists can't even tell the difference. Suddenly, the Crusader of Freedom has nothing to say. Hypocrisy level legend. I responded to him down here, and I said, will you still call this out? Here it is, by the way. This is Forward, Jewish independent nonprofit. Here's what it says. Introducing the Frumqua, Jewish woman under the burqa. It says, and this is in Israel, 2015. It says, no, this isn't a Dementor or modern art installation. This isn't even, as you're more likely to expect, a Muslim woman wearing a burqa. It was a sweltering hot day of 80-degree weather that photographer Yavak Lederman saw this site in Bet Shemesha, or Shemsha. How do you say that? Or Shemesh, excuse me. A Jewish woman and her two daughters, a dark black clothing covering them head to toe in Israel. Isn't that interesting? So what's funny to me, and almost just disgusting about it, is that I made this point before about Jewish head coverings. You know that there are women, Orthodox women in the Jewish religion that are required to wear head coverings, right? Probably not, because that's totally crazy and completely hypocritical in the way they call it out. But it's only when you're a different color skin. That's what matters, right? So totally racist. Exactly what Zionists actually are in every effing context. It's crazy to me how obvious this is. So what's funny, again, is that you've got people like Tommy Robinson that are screaming, that just like Elon Musk, that are fanning the flames of this radical hatred towards Muslims when, oh, you just called out Judaism. And I said, will you still call this out as having no place in the 21st century once you realize it's actually a picture of a Jewish woman in Israel? As Forward covered below, which I promise you, even though I'm showing it from a Jewish platform that's claiming this is the fact and you can easily look it up, just look up the image. You'll find it all over the place. They'll still deny it. I bet you there was still people will argue you're still wrong or you're still there's no way, because you just won't let it be, because that's not what fits into the way you view things. So the question is the same. Is this okay with you now that it's Jewish versus Muslim? If it is, you are the problem. If that's okay with you, you are the point is, it's not your choice. People can live within the religion that's there. The bottom line is, it is a weird thing to suddenly be okay with it if it's not Muslim. That means you are being radicalized by Zionism, I would argue, which is exactly what Tommy Robinson is funded by. Isn't that crazy? This is an important thing to share, I think, guys. And look what's funny to me. You know, this is a gotcha moment. I've shared this 3 different times. Look at the engagement on this. You think Twitter's not suppressing that? I've got 80,000 followers now. You think nobody sees that? Guys, it's just not being shown up. I promise you. Please caption it, share it. It's hilarious to me how much this gets suppressed. You know why, in my opinion? Because Elon Musk is a part of this agenda. Here's an example. Mehdi Hassan, who I'm not a fan of, says, check the date on this shocking story. And then ask yourself why Nigel Farage and Elon Musk haven't been tweeting about these people. You know why? They know why. We all know why. That's what he says. Well, these 6 white people, Scottish child abuse gang members jailed for between 8 and 20 years. Look at that. January 2025, 27. That's 2 days ago. You have an entire Scottish gang arrested, covered by, why aren't they covering it? It's a fair point, right? Well, I mean, it's obvious, guys. If you can't recognize by now that they're completely, they're choosing to focus in on what they want you to think is the bigger problem. They want you to believe. And when the reality is, if you actually stand back and look at it, it's not just the individual entities. It is the government involved in all of this. And not just part of it. But yes, the UK government, the US government, yes, there's obvious line, not one side or the other. In fact, if you really want to start drawing lines to the Epstein list, back to the Musks and Trumps and Bidens and Hunters of the world, they're all involved. But they don't want to get into that game. But they love to float the idea that they're somehow going to release that list, even though I doubt that will happen. The obvious point here, guys, is yes, there's an issue. There's a conversation to be had about any gang of whatever religion or skin color that are raping people, obviously. But to try to make it about one type of person or religion makes you the problem. Makes you the disgusting individual that is trying to make it about one thing because of your agenda for a foreign country, I might add. That's my opinion. We always used to be clear that broad stroking was ignorance until it got framed as intelligence. And Mice goes, mega, mega, mega. Right. Because make Europe great again is America first? Remind me how that works. But of course, Peter Sweden says, reject socialism, restore free speech, protect the border. But we don't care about this, the most obvious example of all the things you're pointing to, right? You literally go down the checkbox of everything he's talking about, and that is Zionism. At least in some cases, what they're feigning, right? Like the woke mindset, which is all about the manipulation of all of us. But guys, we need to see what's really going on. How clearly they're trying to use these conversations to distract you while they literally build you a prison around you. Now, as Matt Kennard pointed out, unfortunately, well, actually in response to Elon Musk, which is, by the way, the game he's playing, right? So he does a literal Nazi salute, whether he meant it that way or not, which is the same way we've argued the entire time. I don't know his mind. He could be stupid enough to think that made sense and think he meant my very aggressive biting my lip and hitting my chest, giving your heart, because that makes sense, twice. I mean, I really don't even know. I don't care at this point. It's ridiculous. I don't think he's a Nazi. I think it's a silly thing to argue, but he's clearly a little bit extreme in a lot of ways. But I still don't know whether that meant this. I think it'd be stupid, even if he was an actual Nazi, to think he would do that publicly. It seems silly. The point is, if you're not brain dead, it's identical to an actual salute. I mean, even many people put out that clip where it's literally along with the blood tribe. It's identical. So to pretend a jumping jack is not a jumping jack because you didn't mean to do a jumping jack is dumb. It's the same thing, right? So that's the point. So he did a Nazi salute, whether he meant it that way or not. And then he said people called him out for being a Nazi. As alternatively, they called him out for being a Zionist, right? Yeah. And he goes, apparently I'm a Zionist and a Nazi. Ha ha ha. Exactly, dummy. It's exactly the case. But what's funny, and again, I don't think he's a Nazi. What's funny is he's definitely a very, very clearly, at least bought off and influencing for a Zionist agenda. But the point is obviously, yes, that's absolutely more connected than he realizes, if not identical. And he says, unfortunately, I don't mean in the sense of they're exactly the same thing. That's the wrong choice of words. That they are synonymous, I guess, in the same way that one is working along with the other, that the outcome of the extremist ideology seems to be very similar. And he says, unfortunately, there is no contradiction between Nazism and Zionism. Their goals of emptying Europe of its Jewish population aligned. It's the truth. They are also both racist, supremacist, and colonial ideologies. True. The reality is, if you go back to the origin point of Herzl, who was a Zionist, he was an atheist, wrote down his extremist opinions of Jewish people all the way back then. Arguably, some opinions are that they were the Christian Zionists that were using the Jewish population. That's his point. However you look at it, though, the argument was to remove them. Same thing, same deal. And it says the Havara agreement between the Nazis and the Zionist organization signed in 1933 was concerned with transferring German Jews to mandatory Palestine. So they worked with them, guys. It's on the record. You can look it up on Wikipedia, for crying out loud. With 60,000 moving in for 6 years in 1939. Let me make sure I got that. It was this one. It's that tweet I've shown you before from Dan Cohen. I'll come back to it. So he goes on to say, Reinhard Hendrik, one of Hitler's most notorious lieutenants, wrote in the SS paper in 1935, quote, the Nazi government finds itself in complete agreement with the great spiritual movement within Jewry itself, so-called Zionism. Think about that. Now, it depends on what you believe here. If you think that Hitler was only going after Jews, then why does that make sense? It would make sense because it's not actually Judaism. It is an ideology meant to destroy it for its own purposes. Then you can find the easy to line up. But it says 1937, Adolf Eichmann, one of the key architects of the destruction of European Jewry, met with the Jewish Zionist and Haganah agent we've talked about, Fievel Polks in Berlin, to discuss the possibility that the Nazis might even supply weapons for the Zionist fight against the British mandate in Palestine, and that Eichmann could arrange for Germany's Jews to be deported there. Later in the same year, Eichmann was smuggled into Palestine by the Zionists disguised as a journalist. He was eventually expelled by the British. Ken Livingstone had his reputation destroyed for mentioning these facts. Right, here's Zachary Foster, has a PhD in Palestinian history from Princeton. He says, just wrote a piece on this topic, Why Anti-Semites Love Israel, a brief history. The point is, guys, these are facts, very easily verified, and you still get attacked for pointing them out. What does that show you? As Dan Cohen highlighted, and this was the point that came up when this guy early on in the post-October 7th was the oldest living IDF reservist who was part of the Lehigh Party. And he said, these animals can no longer live. Kill every one of them, women, and child. That's what he was saying. Because he's the extremist, guys. Like, they were the ones that were, those videos you can see of them laughing about how they raped young children and destroyed. Look, it's not a joke. These are the Zionist Lehigh maniacs that were the ones committing the Nakba. And they laugh about it. They still give a Lehigh pin today to people that do whatever they gain, I guess, whatever you think deserves that. But he goes, this person was a member of the Lehigh Zionist terrorist group that twice attempted to ally with Nazi Germany and sought to found a copycat fascist state. On January 11th, 1941, Vice Admiral Rolf and Der Warmitz, the German naval attaché in Turkey, filed a report conveying an offer by Lehigh to actively take part in the war on Germany's side in return for Germany's support to establishment of a historic Jewish state on the national and totalitarian basis bound by the treaty with German Reich. So much evidence. It's incredible. And down here, and this is the article I'll show you next. This is from Haaretz, showing you that they continued to try to align with Nazi Germany even after the final solution had begun. Now, that has to be an important point because we're supposed to believe the entire foundational point of why they exist was to fight the final things like the final solution. They'll never again, except they were part of it, guys. Not every Israeli or every Jew. It's about the Zionist Israeli government. Well, every Israeli point doesn't make sense in that context because we're talking about pre-Israel. But the point is nonetheless, it's not about every element. It's about what they were doing that bastardized these ideas for their benefit, just like they do today, including the Hannibal Directive. Same dynamic. But here's the article from Haaretz. Oh, before that, actually, this is me just putting, highlighting this. Here is Voice of Rabbis. It's another account, 294,000 followers, Jews United Against Zionism. These groups are rapidly growing. I keep talking about this and I keep getting pushback, even people that just, I feel like I've got I don't blindly, I question it. I wonder but just like with COVID, I feel like you start to pick up on these signals about when you can see these things. And right now, I think it's long since past the point with which most people, Jews included, are seeing this. Israel was founded under the sponsorship of Adolf Hitler, they wrote. The Zionist organization was Hitler's ally. Zionists are people who trample on Jewish honor, Jewish conscience, and Jewish morality. Super contentious. They're rabbis. They're Orthodox Jews against Zionism. That's why they are hated by Zionism. It says, since this will get major pushback from Zionists running from their own history, be sure to watch our show discussing the two and their overt connection. That's this article from Zionism versus Nazism. And then I highlight this, which I'll show you in the article. As Haaretz reported in 2023, Zionism continued to seek an ally with Nazi Germany even after the final solution began. If you do not know this, ask yourself how that's possible. Transcripts. We'll go there in a second. This is the headline. Zionist military orgs' efforts to recruit Nazis in fight against the British are revealed. The Haganah interrogated members of the Lehigh in 1942, and the recently released transcript shed light on the dark chapter in the right-wing militia's history. Now, as always, you can argue there are parts, just like in the main point when you actually go past the Nakba, the history shows that the Jewish people that lived in the area were not okay with what Zionists were doing to the Palestinians. I can't speak for everything. I'm sure there are people that did support it. The point is that what you get reported both through the UN and other local things that you can still find. They were outraged. This doesn't represent what we believe. That's the point, guys. And they just forced it through and had political support. And to this very day, those Jewish people did not ring, their voices didn't carry. The Zionists pretending to be the Jewish people, they did. And that has influenced even Jewish people today. The reality, though, is to say that this was a huge part of Zionism. Not every single element necessarily, even on that side of it, right? But nonetheless, this is what has this is what won out. As it says, transcripts of Zettler's interrogation, this is one of the leaders of the Lehi Party, which were released to the public last month. And this is what's interesting is their state archives, most of which they rarely let out because they know what it looks like, include information on the dark chapter, its ties with Nazi Germany. This is Haaretz, guys. We will communicate with any military power ready to help with the establishment of the Kingdom of Israel, even if it's Germany. Zettler told these astonished interrogators, the only condition is that we get weapons so we can rebel against the English. Right. The English that later ended up giving them, through the Balfour Declaration, the very area probably to fight. So the point is, guys, it's always about something other than what they pretend they care about. These governments or power structures rarely care about you. And they allowed one of the most extremist racist elements in the world to grow in power for their benefit at the expense of the people they claim they were fighting for. That's everywhere you look right now. All of it's there if you just care to look. Max Blumenthal points this out. Same thing, Elon going, apparently I'm a Zionist and a Nazi. He says this coin was minted by Joseph Goebbels in honor of the friendly visit of the top SS Jewish affairs officer, Leopold von Mildenstein, to Zionist kibbutzim in Palestine, 1933. The Zionist movement in Nazi Germany soon collaborated on the notorious transfer agreement. You can look this up for yourself. It's kind of hard to miss. So it's important to highlight how I think this is already playing a factor in today, right? Not just the faking of elements we're going to see or the Nazi marches or the extremist elements or the false flags that I believe are in the works. We also have the reality of this, which I think is, look, you can read this however you want. This is my opinion. Because I don't know for sure exactly the ins and outs of every part of what this was or ultimately whether this was the reason it happened. But I think this makes a lot of sense. And this, now that I'm seeing this really start to come to fruition, these things start to stand out more. Now, as Greg Stoker points out, this is a government, a congressional, it's going through Congress about illegalizing Antifa. It says they will never tell you fascism has arrived. Instead, they will make anti-fascism illegal. White supremacist goon squads like Patriot Front will never be targeted. Instead, they'll be used to do the dirty work the state doesn't want to be seen doing. So here's what's interesting. Antifa, I think we all know by now, was not, it seems pretty clear it was not even an organic entity. This was like another Patriot Front element. And that more so than any of them, I think it's been pretty clearly proven. Sort of like different other militia groups that seem to be led by some FBI informant. That's the kind of thing we're seeing. And this came out very clearly. So my point is, through using a group that makes, like, I'll just read what I said first because it's funny. Not funny, but just, it's, I said, now the long-term Antifa-fed manipulation comes into focus. A group literally acting fascistic while feigning resistance to fascism. That's the important part. Seemingly designed to draw obvious pushback that's then used to justify government classification of resistance to fascism as illegal, but without saying that. You see what I'm saying? So Antifa, anti-fascist, they're not anti-fascist. What they do is fascism. So what's funny, or at the very least authoritarian, or calling for, the point is they then act out in ridiculous ways. So we then go bad group, and then they go, okay, group bad. And then through that, make it illegal to essentially, so then you stand up and go, what you're doing is actual fascism. Oh, boy, that's Antifa. You can't do that. You could decide for yourself. I think it's kind of an easy this is a problem reaction solution dynamic. Where we're at a point where they have, through a series of well-crafted manipulations, driven us right where they want us. It seems to make sense to me. And people commenting under this say it's really so easy. We don't need new ridiculous laws. I say this all the time. I agree. We need to enforce the ones we already have that make sense. If a guy wearing a bandana throws a brick at a window, that's already a crime. Marjorie Taylor Greene, the one introducing this. We don't need a new law. So think about that. You have a Republican introducing a law to ban a certain way of thinking, to ban anti-fascism, right? Deeming certain conduct of members of Antifa as domestic terrorism. So again, now, yes, you're going to argue when they broke the law, but that's his point. There are already laws. So it's redundant or it's not. It's not about the law. It's about using the guise of stopping when they do law, right? When they do illegal things, but in this fashion. And then that broadens out to just anybody do. You see where this goes? And look, at the very least, whatever you think about it, this is a Republican deeming a certain style of thought, action, views as terrorism. Because if you read through it, guys, this is, as always, it's broad. It will end up applying to other things than just throwing bricks through windows or wearing masks. And, this is how it always works. But of course, because they've framed it as anybody with a brain, I would argue, thinks Antifa is ridiculous. I think it's obvious what they do is counterproductive, but just like a lot of the similar types of things on the right. Like a lot of these different groups, like I wouldn't compare them to like a Patriot Front. I think they're not really equivalent. It's a different kind of game. But whatever you want to point at, there's all sorts of little faux groups on the right doing similar things in the same way. And that is easy to go. Everyone should go, well, those are ridiculous. But that's just how it works. This person says, has no one else seen those 2-hour-long Antifa Zoom meetings? And I thank you, pointed out Revolution for sharing that. And we've talked about this once, I think, in the past. Here it is from National File. Leaked Zoom call. DC Antifa have planned violence for election night. 2020. Well, we've talked about this too, right? Here is some of those people. Here are some of those people. And this was the title show. January 6th was always a very clear government operation. An important Tennessee bill. That's the second part. Always clear government operation. Now, obviously, this is 2023. We're pointing back at it. The point is you can clearly prove this, where this guy was a member of the Azov movement who was there screaming things in Russian. That's quite obvious. This guy was a member of some kind of left-leaning group that was there going, we did it, we tricked him, we got him on video. Epps going, guys, everything about this is so transparent, but you don't really see any real outcome. How much you want to bet we don't see much more even coming through Trump's administration, whether Pelosi or otherwise, despite how very obvious it is, because it's not about them, it's about you. All of them against you. Now, Elon Musk points to rabbit hole again, which again, let's see what they've got now. Almost 1 million followers now. The national debt and how much each person in America would have to contribute to pay it off. Look at that. My God. $36 trillion. 106,000 for every American. Elon Musk goes, it's critical to take action on this now. Yeah, you said the thing. Yes, that's the right thing to say. Well, what's going to happen? Well, here's $500 billion for AI infrastructure, right? Here's new hiring. Look, as I just simply looked up really quickly on this, Department of Government Efficiency established. Okay. What has it done since its establishment? Well, this is an overview, right? But it is pretty well encompassing. It says establishment of DOGE teams. Okay. Each federal agency was instructed to establish a team with 4 different people. Okay. So more hiring. Okay. Software modernization. The U.S. Digital Service, which is otherwise now called DOGE, by the way. That's important not to forget. They simply renamed the digital services, which are working towards digital IDs and other. That's just DOGE now. So you've been played. Has commenced a software modernization initiative aimed at improving the quality of efficiency with government software, IT systems. Oh, okay. So digital upgrades. So more work. Efficiency, maybe. We'll see how it plays out. Promotion of AI and other tools. DOGE is expected to promote the use of artificial intelligence. Okay. So again, maybe that will reduce some jobs, I guess, but that's not, it's either way. It's about adding and growing artificial intelligence infrastructure. That's spending. Focus on defense spending. DOGE is anticipated to scrutinize the Department of Defense, a key target. Okay. Expected to. Okay. We'll see what happens. We've seen a lot. Now, look, I'm arguing simply that a lot of this is about it's happening. We're signing this document. We haven't actually seen a lot of outcome. Doesn't mean it won't happen. I almost guarantee that it will happen, because otherwise, how do they keep tricking you into your technocratic prison? But it's interesting because it's still kind of like, we did it already. It's over, like we did like last time before it even happened. Contractor workforce review. There's been a recognition that the Department of Government Efficiency might be overlooking other sources of savings. Conflict of interest concerns. There's concerns about, this is just other thoughts on it. No, either way, I'm of the mind that right now we haven't seen this. But don't worry though, Doge News shared a screenshot that shows a thing that says 33 billion. So therefore we did it. Doge just saved us $34 billion. Cool. There's no source material. I guess we'll just take your word for it. I mean, I don't think that's the case. I'm sure there's some level of maneuvering here, but if you're guys, if you're going to sign off on even the 100 billion that's going to be going out right away for the infrastructure, then that's already a wash. So just not pretend like just because you're cutting off something and spending more, you're still not saving. You're still spending over the amount that you cut. So they love to pretend they're doing one thing while they're not doing something. It's obvious the way this is being played. Overall, it's about trying to get you small wins to make you think you're changing everything. Well, what they do is roll out exactly what they're using to keep you in place. The AI control structure, digital IDs, social credit, all the technocracy that we know is coming. Now, I think I'm going to pause right there, guys, and go and try to come back at this tomorrow. I'm hoping I'll have enough time tomorrow. What I'm going to get into, I'll just show you really quickly. It's about the spending overlaps. This one is the money, the freezing of the federal money, which is interesting only because it went out and everyone defended it and the TAV said you're wrong and it's right. And then he pulled it right back. So now he's rescinded the memo. So all the people that were screaming that it was right, it's right. Well, now he just basically rescinded it. So I think it's pretty clear that it went awry. It became clear that Republicans were also going to be hurt by this, and that was already becoming a clear thing that was being ignored by the team sport Republicans. And so that's what I think was happening. Overall, it's about this broad sweeping thing that the other thing was too, that it was, I think, against the law. Like the game where you can just sweepingly pull back on everything, even though I'll be the first to argue that through Congress or not, there's a lot of abuse and just profiteering and criminal activity. But nonetheless, my point is the same, as if you're going to come in and just do the same thing back to the way you like it, well, all you're going to do is perpetuate the problem. If we actually want things to change, then you got to go through doing them the right way, right? Arguably, it's unconstitutional for him to just change funding that was been approved by Congress. But when's the last time they even cared about Congress for war or anything else? It's all an illusion, in my opinion. But either way, it got pushed back. We'll see. I'm going to go into every one of them. I'm going to try to wrap this up right now. Or the condom discussion, which, just so you know, guys, it's embarrassingly stupid. They're wrong. I don't think this new KJP even knows that. And she's KJP for a completely different reason. I don't think these people are even remotely the right person for these positions. They're the right person because they're an automaton that will do what they're told. But my point is, the condom discussion appears to be completely false. I looked through this in depth, and whether it's because they won't even allow those to be sent, and when this was supposed to be agreed upon, it was well before the ceasefire. They're lying, guys, but that's what they do. Or the idea about the podcasters, bloggers, and social media influencers being in the press room now. Social media influencers. How is that even remotely the same thing as a journalist, by the way? And why would they be involved? So you're going to get these, it's just, I can't even wait to see how stupid this ends up being, if that's the reality. And you're going to have a bunch of ridiculous TikTok influencers standing in there asking what they think is important. Most likely going to be whatever this platform tells them to say, which is the rapid response 47. Oh, so a White House fact checker. I thought we were done with fact checkers. Oh, but the right kind of fact checkers, our fact check. Oh, okay. Got it. So hypocrites. Understood. We're going to talk about, there it is, the ethics pledges. And I am going to get into this more because it's important, I think, to see how this overlaps with him canceling ethics from Biden's side of things, which, again, it's Biden, so it's bad. Well, that's not automatically the case. If he's removing things that ultimately concern even Republicans, maybe we should ask what these are. And then ask if he hasn't signed any ethics pledges and wonder what that means in regard to foreign funding and how that works with his cryptocurrency overlap. Right? As it even says right here, even his own supporters are starting to ask whether people can simply, including foreign governments, funnel money to the government or to the Trump family. How is that not exactly what this can be used for? Whether Trump or Melania coin, it's unaccountable. No ethics pledges, so we don't even know. I'll talk about this tomorrow. RFK Jr., his stake in a gene editing platform Small amount, by the way, but still worthy of consideration. And I find it to be hypocritical. The drone conversation. I mean, honestly, some of these are small. Like, it's just crazy to me. All these are so dishonest. Everyone like Jack Posobiec out there trying to just flatly misinform you, saying that, oh my God, they just said this is where he's right here. Trump just told us it's a confirm that Biden did this to it. No, that's not what they just said. You guys are so blatantly dishonest. Bottom line is they all knew, guys. And the real point should be, look at all the people like Alex Jones that were screaming some other narrative every 30 seconds. Now it turns out even Trump knew that it was just their drones. Or what she actually said was FFA, random drone flyers that are random citizens, and other things, which, by the way, was what Biden's White House already told us. So we already got told that. And now they're reiterating that, and people like this guy go, oh my God, they just know what they're doing. They're trying to get you worked up about one side because they know you'll fall for it if you're a partisan player. Don't be that gullible. The drone dynamic was obvious, as people like this were talking about. It was about the end game. Rationalizing this, whether it's because of the Palantir advertisement they played at the same exact time, December 2024, about drones at the Navy Army game, or the idea of Palantir working with Israel, overlapping on these things is about driving in the technocratic outcome. As True Stream Media says, so they knew the drones were what they were the whole time. And they just wanted everybody, including members of the local state governments, wasting time in meetings with no answers, to spend weeks freaking out about nothing? Yes. So if Trump knew about that, why didn't they say anything? Why now are they still giving you cryptic answers? Because it's all the same thing. It's your government manipulating you for the one outcome. Or the lie about the military entering California to turn the water on. Do you not realize that they know you'll end up knowing they're lying? So there's obviously a game being played here. No, there was maintenance. It was down for 3 days, turn it back on. No military involved. They're lying to you. And Trump knew you would find that out. So why did he lie about it? We'll go over more of this coming up soon. We'll leave it there for today. But thank you for tuning in, guys. Appreciate your patience. There's, obviously a lot going on in general, but right now it's important that I'm with my family, and that will take precedent for me for as long as it takes. But just know that I'm still going to be here. I'm still going to be working. And knowing even today, I honestly wasn't sure I'd be able to take the time. I will lose my mind if I don't take time to get this stuff out. And the other thing I actually thought about this was, I know that's what she wants. I know that she cares about this. Even today, I on a personal note, I was going, every time I go to do the show before I get started, I send a link out to certain people that want it, that direct text messages, because it's just easier to see. And she was one of those people. And I had a little moment at the starting of this where I was going through sending it out, and I saw I was going to send it to her like I always do, And I just simply sent it to her anyway. And I said, this one's for you. So she's out there watching, and that's why we do this. We're doing this because of what we believe in, because we care about people out there that, that want good things in the world, that genuinely want to see the outcomes that we all know we're fighting for, not for some guise, not for some half measure, but just truly fighting for what we believe in at all costs. It's talk about costs, guys. There's so many people today doing this work, as I've said before, that are going to suffer the consequences of this forever. But it's still worth it, because what we're doing is important. What you're doing right now is important. We're making a difference with every single moment we do this work. Every single moment we're making a difference, and we're impacting someone's life. You cannot put a measure on that. So I'm going to continue to do this as every opportunity. We need your support. We can't do it without you. You are the last American vagabond. Thank you for being here. I love you all. As always, question everything. Come to your own conclusions. Stay vigilant.